Hey there, tonight we're diving into the brutal customs of the ancient Thracians. What you're about to discover might challenge everything you assumed about their fierce and mysterious world. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the midst of a land that doesn't quite know whether it wants to be a rugged mountain range or an endless stretch of forest. Welcome to ancient Thrace, a place that could make even the most adventurous geography enthusiast second-guess their life choices. The Balkans are the kind of backdrop you'd expect to see in a fantasy epic, minus the CGI dragons. But don't be fooled by the scenery's allure. This region is home to over 200 tribes that are as fragmented as a jigsaw puzzle thrown in a blender, each with its own identity, customs, and let's be honest, quirks. Now, if you think the concept of too many cooks in the kitchen is bad, try managing 200 tribes with a penchant for independence. It's like herding cats, but the cats are armed and not particularly fond of central authority. This fragmentation, though, makes them mysterious, like that enigmatic neighbor who never leaves their house, but somehow knows everyone's business. These Thracians, with their penchant for tattoos and war paint, were the original canvas warriors, turning their bodies into living art long before it was cool. Greek historians, those ancient gossips with a flair for the dramatic, were fascinated and a bit horrified by the Thracians. Herodotus, for instance, couldn't stop talking about them, and not always in the nicest terms. To be fair, if you stumbled upon people who considered tattoos a rite of passage and wore a family tradition, you'd have a few choice words too. The Thracians were the rock stars of the ancient world, living hard and fighting harder. The Greeks were particularly taken aback by the Thracians' warrior spirit. In fact, Herodotus once said that if they could ever stop fighting each other long enough to unite, they'd be unstoppable. That's a big if, akin to saying if cats and dogs could team up, they'd rule the world. The Thracians had a reputation for being fierce in battle, which was as much a survival tactic as it was a cultural norm. Life in the Balkans wasn't a walk in the park, unless that park was filled with rival tribes and unpredictable weather. But let's not romanticize their warrior lifestyle. Being a Thracian warrior came with its own set of harsh realities. The terrain they called home was both a blessing and a curse. The mountains provided natural defenses, but they also made agriculture tricky and travel a logistical nightmare. Imagine trying to organize a family reunion where everyone insists on living on separate peaks. The isolation led to the development of unique tribal identities, but also meant that cooperation was about as rare as a unicorn sighting. The Thracians were also known for their peculiar customs, which often left their Greek neighbors scratching their heads or running for cover. Take their funerary practices, for example. In some tribes, when a person died, they were mourned with a feast, and in some cases, a human sacrifice. It's the kind of send-off that would make even the most lavish modern funeral seem tame. But before you start judging, remember that these customs were deeply rooted in their beliefs about the afterlife and honor. The Greeks, with their penchant for drama, might have exaggerated a bit, but there was definitely a kernel of truth in their accounts. And then there were the tattoos. Forget trendy ink with deep personal meaning. Thracians wore their tattoos like badges of honor, each telling a story of battles fought and victories won. It was like wearing your resume on your skin, except instead of listing Excel skills, it detailed how many enemies you'd bested in combat. War paint was another staple, turning warriors into walking murals before they charged into battle. It wasn't just for intimidation. It was a declaration of identity, a way to say, "This is who I am," without uttering a word. Now, let's talk about the economy, because even warriors need to eat right. The Thracians weren't just about fighting and tattoos. They were skilled in metallurgy and agriculture, adapting to the land's challenges with ingenuity. They traded with their Greek neighbors, providing them with slaves, cattle, and horses in exchange for luxuries like wine and olive oil. The Thracians had a particular fondness for wine, which they consumed in quantities that would put a frat party to shame. It was said that they drank their wine undiluted, a practice that appalled the Greeks, who preferred their wine watered down. But then again, the Thracians weren't exactly known for moderation. Politically, the Thracians were complex. They didn't have a centralized government, which sounds liberating until you realize it meant constant power struggles. The tribes were often led by kings or chieftains, whose authority was as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Alliances were as fickle as the weather, and betrayal was just another day at the office. This lack of unity kept them from ever posing a significant threat to larger empires, despite their potential. The Thracians' fragmented nature and fierce independence were both their greatest strength and their Achilles' heel. They were a people who thrived in chaos, for whom war was a way of life and individualism was celebrated. However, this also meant that they were often at odds with each other, preventing them from achieving the unity that might have allowed them to change the course of history. In the grand tapestry of history, the Thracians were a vibrant, if chaotic, thread. Their customs may seem brutal to modern sensibilities, but they were part of a culture that valued strength, honor, and identity. They were a people of paradoxes, fierce yet fragmented, mysterious yet all too human. So, as you stand in this rugged land, amidst the echoes of ancient battles and the whispers of forgotten tales, remember that history is never as straightforward as it seems. The Thracians may have been tough to pin down, but that's what makes their story all the more fascinating. And as you wander through their world, keep an open mind. After all, history is full of surprises. So, as you stand in this rugged land, amidst the echoes of ancient battles and the whispers of forgotten tales, you're probably wondering how the Thracians managed to organize themselves amidst all that chaos. Well, let's talk about the social pecking order in Thrace, a system as layered as a baklava made by a chef with trust issues. At the top, you had the chieftains and kings, the big cheeses of Thracian society. These guys were as close to royalty as you could get without wearing the crown jewels, and they wielded power like a toddler with a magic wand, unpredictably and sometimes destructively. Now, these chieftains weren't just sitting around sipping undiluted wine all day, though there was plenty of that. They were warrior leaders, expected to lead by example, which often meant charging into battle at the front lines. Think of them as the action heroes of their tribe, only with more facial hair and fewer special effects. The power of a chieftain was often backed by wealth, and in Thrace, wealth wasn't measured in gold coins, but in land, livestock, and interestingly, a healthy stockpile of wine and honey, two commodities that could turn any gathering into a party worth crashing. Beneath the chieftains were the warriors, the muscle of the Thracian social body. These guys were the bread and butter of Thracian life, and they took their jobs seriously. Not just soldiers, they were the guardians of their tribe's honor, the kind of folks you'd want on your side in a bar fight, or, ancient skirmish. They trained hard, fought harder, and wore their battle scars with pride. For them, war was not just a means to an end, but a lifestyle choice, like going vegan, but with more bloodshed. Then we have the ordinary folk, the unsung heroes of Thracian society, who were often more concerned with the practicalities of everyday life than with glory on the battlefield. These were the farmers, craftsmen, and traders who kept the wheels of the economy turning. Without them, even the fiercest warrior would be left hungry and poorly equipped. The Thracian economy was an intriguing mix of agriculture and trade, with a side of livestock rearing for good measure. They were particularly known for their honey production, a sweet surprise considering the region's rugged terrain. Honey was such a big deal that it was practically liquid gold, used not just in trade, but also in religious rituals and medicinal concoctions. Speaking of trade, the Thracians were no slouches when it came to bartering. They had a knack for producing high-quality goods that were highly sought after by their neighbors, especially the Greeks. Thracian wine, for instance, was famous or infamous, depending on who you asked. The Greeks often turned up their noses at the Thracians' penchant for drinking wine straight, but let's be honest, when you're living in a world where the next tribal spat could be just around the corner, sipping diluted wine seems a bit too leisurely. Moving on to the arts and crafts, the Thracians had a flair for metalwork that would make even the most seasoned blacksmith do a double take. They crafted intricate jewelry and weapons with a level of sophistication that would surprise anyone who bought into the myth of the Thracians as simple barbarians. Their skill in metallurgy was legendary, producing everything from delicate gold ornaments to sturdy weapons that could withstand the rigors of battle. It's like finding out your favorite heavy metal band also plays a mean jazz set on the weekends. Unexpected, but impressive. And let's not forget the horses. Ah yes, the Thracians were the original horse whisperers long before it was cool. They bred horses that were not only strong and fast, but also incredibly resilient, adapting to the harsh Thracian landscape. These horses were prized possessions, a symbol of status and wealth, and often played a central role in warfare. If you thought horse racing was a modern invention, think again. The Thracians had their own version, a thrilling spectacle that was as much about showcasing breeding prowess as it was about entertainment. So there you have it, a snapshot of Thracian society and economy, a world where power was as much about influence as it was about wealth, and where art and craft flourished amidst the chaos of tribal rivalries. It's a testament to the complexity of human societies, a reminder that even in the most tumultuous environments, culture and economy can thrive in unexpected ways. As we continue to unravel the story of the Thracians, remember that history is never black and white. It's a vibrant tapestry woven from the threads of human experience, each one telling a unique story. Stay tuned, because the Thracians have plenty more tales to tell. Now let's shift gears and delve into some of the more, let's call them, colorful aspects of Thracian life, those customs that get historians' eyebrows raising and modern folks shaking their heads in disbelief. It's like finding out your sweet grandma used to be a roller derby champ. You just can't look at things the same way again. First up, we have their funerary practices, which for some Thracian tribes could only be described as a blend of a Viking saga and a soap opera. When a Thracian noble kicked the bucket, it wasn't just a summer farewell. It was a full-on production. The body would be laid out for several days, while the family threw what could only be described as a wake on steroids. We're talking feasts, drinking, and maybe some light weeping. Basically every scene from a Hollywood funeral, minus the dramatic will reading. Now, here's where things take a turn for the macabre. In certain tribes, the deceased would be buried with their favorite belongings, which, given the Thracians' love for weapons, often included a small arsenal. And if you were particularly unlucky, you'd find yourself going 6 feet under with them, literally. Some Thracians practiced a grim tradition where a deceased nobleman's wife might be encouraged to join her husband in the afterlife. Think of it as a loyalty program, but with considerably higher stakes. While we don't have precise numbers on how often this happened, accounts from ancient writers suggest it was more than a one-off. It's worth noting, though, that these stories might have been exaggerated by Greek historians with a flair for the dramatic. Speaking of drama, the Thracians were infamous for their drinking habits, which were less elegant wine tasting and more frat party meets medieval brawl. They consumed wine undiluted, a serious faux pas in Greek society. To the Thracians, though, watering down wine was about as sensible as wearing sandals in a snowstorm. This fondness for strong drink often led to epic drinking sessions that sometimes ended in brawls, because what's a good party without a little chaos? These events were so notorious that they became a staple in Greek storytelling, though probably with some added embellishments. After all, what's a good story without a bit of exaggeration? But let's not overlook the elephant in the room, those ominous tales of human sacrifice. This is the kind of stuff that makes for blockbuster horror flicks, but how much is fact and how much is fiction? The Greeks were quick to paint the Thracians as savages, possibly to justify their own superiority complex. While there are accounts of sacrifices in Thracian culture, it's hard to pin down how prevalent they really were. Some modern historians suggest that the stories were blown out of proportion, like ancient clickbait designed to scandalize and titillate. Still, the idea of sacrifice wasn't entirely alien in the ancient world. It was more a question of scale and frequency. Let's put these customs into context, though. The Thracians lived in a world where the line between life and death was razor-thin. Their rituals were deeply rooted in a worldview that saw life as fleeting and the afterlife as an extension of earthly existence. Burying a warrior with his weapons or a noble with his favorite possessions wasn't just about materialism. It was about ensuring they were prepared for whatever came next. And while human sacrifice might seem brutal to us, it was likely seen as an offering to appease the gods, a way to curry favor in a world that was often unforgiving. The Thracians' reputation for brutality and excess was as much a product of their environment as it was of their culture. The rugged Balkan landscape was a tough place to carve out a living, and their customs reflected a society that had to be equally tough to survive. In a land where alliances shifted like the wind and survival was never guaranteed, the Thracians' practices were a practical, if harsh, response to their circumstances. So while it's easy to judge these customs from our modern perspective, it's important to remember that history is a tapestry of human experience, each thread representing a different worldview. The Thracians, with their fierce independence and unorthodox customs, were a testament to the diversity of human culture. Their rituals might seem brutal to us, but they were part of a complex society that valued strength, honor, and identity. As we continue to explore the Thracians' world, keep in mind that history is rarely black and white. The past is a kaleidoscope of stories, each one offering a glimpse into the lives of those who came before us. And as we piece together the puzzle of the Thracians, remember that every detail, no matter how grim or bizarre, adds to the rich tapestry of human history. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover about these enigmatic people. Now, let's dig into the political chessboard that was the Thracian world, a game where the pieces sometimes moved themselves and occasionally flipped the entire board. The Thracians were like the ancient political powerhouses you didn't see coming, the wild card in a deck stacked with empires like the Greeks and Persians. Their alliances and conflicts were as unpredictable as a reality TV show, but with higher stakes and considerably more facial hair. To kick things off, let's talk about the complicated love-hate relationship between the Thracians and the Greeks. Picture it, two neighbors with more in common than they cared to admit, yet constantly at each other's throats, or occasionally in each other's arms. The Greeks, with their city-states like Athens and Sparta, were both fascinated and terrified by the Thracians. Herodotus, never one to shy away from a juicy tale, once quipped that if the Thracians ever got their act together, they'd be invincible. That's a big if, like saying if cats could coordinate, they'd run the internet. Oh wait, they do. The Thracians were masters of playing both sides, a bit like the friend who borrows money from one pal to pay back another. One day they'd be fighting alongside the Greeks against a mutual enemy, and the next they'd be signing treaties with the same foes. Take the Persian Wars, for example. The Thracians initially resisted Persian advances, but when the Persians brought their A-game, and by A-game, we mean an army that could make a Spartan sweat, the Thracians decided maybe a little collaboration wouldn't hurt. This wasn't just about survival, it was strategic genius. The Thracians knew how to pivot, making alliances that favored their immediate needs, even if it meant cozying up to yesterday's enemy. Now, let's not forget the role of Thracian mercenaries, those hired guns who were the ancient world's answer to a temp agency. These guys were the unsung heroes of many a foreign battle, hired by Greeks, Persians, and anyone with enough coin to pay for their services. And they weren't just muscle. They brought with them unique tactics that often left their employers scratching their heads in awe. The Thracians were guerrilla warfare pioneers long before it was trendy, using the rugged terrain of their homeland to their advantage. Ambushes, hit-and-run tactics, and stealthy maneuvers were their bread and butter. They fought like ghosts, appearing and vanishing before their enemies knew what hit them. Their prowess as mercenaries influenced Thracian military tactics back home, creating a feedback loop of innovation. By working with various armies, they absorbed new strategies like a sponge in a puddle of tactics. This adaptability was crucial. While other armies relied on brute force and rigid formations, the Thracians preferred flexibility and cunning, a bit like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. One standout Thracian mercenary was Sue's Roman III, a king who moonlighted as a hired sword. He fought for the Greeks during their internal squabbles, proving that sometimes the best way to protect your kingdom is to take a working vacation. His experience abroad honed his skills and expanded his horizons, a bit like studying abroad, but with more swordplay and fewer toga parties. But let's not romanticize their military might without acknowledging the harsh realities. The Thracians were fierce, but their fragmented nature often left them vulnerable. While they excelled in guerrilla tactics, their lack of unity meant they struggled against well-organized foes. It was a classic case of David vs. Goliath, except David had about 200 siblings who couldn't agree on anything. Economically, war was a double-edged sword. On one hand, being skilled mercenaries brought in wealth and resources. On the other, Constant conflict drained manpower and disrupted trade. The Thracians had to balance the benefits of foreign campaigns with the needs of their own survival, a juggling act that required more dexterity than a circus performer on a unicycle. Now, let's touch on their reputation as unpredictable foes. This wasn't just a stereotype, it was a hard-earned title. The Thracians were known for switching sides faster than you can say political intrigue. This kept their enemies, and sometimes their allies, on their toes. It was a high-stakes game of trust and betrayal, where loyalty was as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. In the grand tapestry of ancient warfare, the Thracians were the vibrant thread that tied together disparate cultures and conflicts. They may not have built empires, but their influence was felt across the ancient world. They were the mercenaries who became legends, the wildcards who kept everyone guessing. And while their story is one of chaos and cunning, it's also a testament to the resilience and adaptability of a people who thrived in a world as unpredictable as they were. So, as we wrap up this chapter of Thracian history, remember that the past is never just a list of dates and battles. It's a living, breathing narrative, full of twists and turns that defy easy explanations. And while the Thracians may have been a bit rough around the edges, their legacy is a reminder that sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones that refuse to follow the script. Stay tuned, because there's more to explore in the world of the Thracians, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. So, what happens when a culture known for its wild unpredictability and fierce independence confronts the mighty machinery of Rome? Picture the Thracians meeting the Romans, a bit like a rock band trying to negotiate with a record label that's more interested in spreadsheets than solos. The Romans, with their penchant for order and structure, were both intrigued and intimidated by the Thracians. He saw people who were as wild as the winds of the Balkans and as unyielding as the mountains they called home. Rome, never one to let potential go to waste, saw something in the Thracians, something they could use. The Thracians' expertise in guerrilla tactics and their formidable skills as warriors were like catnip to the Romans, who were always on the lookout for ways to enhance their military prowess. Enter the Auxilia, the Roman Empire's version of a multicultural military unit. The Thracians, recruited as auxiliary troops, became an integral part of the Roman military machine. In fact, by the 1st century AD, they were one of the largest contingents of non-citizen soldiers in the Roman army. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. The Romans got fierce fighters, and the Thracians got a sense of stability and the perks of Roman citizenship. A win-win, if you could overlook the whole subjugation thing. The Thracians left their mark on the Roman military, not just as soldiers, but as innovators. They brought with them unique tactics that the Romans, ever pragmatic, were quick to adopt. Their cavalry, known for its speed and agility, became a staple of Roman strategy. So if you're picturing Roman soldiers charging into battle with their iconic formations, remember the Thracian cavalry, who added a dash of chaos to the orderly ranks. It's like adding a splash of hot sauce to an otherwise bland dish. It might not be for everyone, but it sure packs a punch. But the Thracians' influence wasn't confined to the battlefield. Culturally, their traditions seeped into Roman life like ink into water. The Thracians were renowned horse breeders, and their equestrian expertise influenced Roman practices. Thracian horses became highly sought after, their endurance and strength prized in both war and sport. The Roman admiration for these steeds was such that Thracian horses were often featured in triumphal processions, showcasing their speed and grace to an audience that loved a good spectacle. Yet, it wasn't all roses and glory. The Romans, in their relentless march towards empire, had a knack for absorbing cultures while simultaneously erasing them. The Thracians, with their fiercely independent tribes, found themselves in a precarious position. Over time, their unique customs and languages began to fade, subsumed by the dominant Roman culture. It's a classic tale of assimilation, where the conqueror's culture overshadows the conquered. The Thracians, who once painted their bodies with the marks of their identity, now found that identity diluted in the vastness of Rome. This brings us to the curious question of the Thracian legacy. Are they the barbaric warriors of legend, or has history done them dirty? The truth is, like most things, it's a little bit of both. Yes, they were fierce and often brutal, but they were also a people of remarkable skill and adaptability. They thrived in a world of chaos, turning the harshness of their environment into a crucible for culture and innovation. Their story is a testament to the resilience of human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is strength to be found in individuality. In modern times, Thracians are often relegated to the footnotes of history, overshadowed by their more famous neighbors. Yet their story remains relevant, offering insights into cultural survival and adaptation. In a world where global cultures intermingle and sometimes clash, the Thracians remind us of the importance of maintaining identity amidst change. They teach us that while empires rise and fall, the spirit of a people is not so easily quelled. So, as you reflect on the Thracians, think of them not just as the tattooed warriors of yore, but as a people whose legacy is woven into the fabric of European history. They were more than the sum of their battles. They were innovators, survivors, and contributors to a world that often overlooked them. Their story is a vibrant thread in the tapestry of history, a reminder that even the most rugged landscapes can produce the most enduring legacies. And there you have it, the tale of the Thracians, a saga of survival, adaptation, and unexpected influence. As you close the chapter on this fascinating people, remember that history is never just about the past. It's about the stories we tell and the lessons we learn, offering us a glimpse into the complexities of human existence. The Thracians, with their fierce independence and enduring spirit, remind us that even in the most tumultuous times, there is always a story worth telling. Rome in the late Republic was like a high-stakes game of political musical chairs, with everyone trying to grab a seat before the music stopped. Except, instead of chairs, we're talking about power, and instead of music, it was the clamor of swords and Senate debates. The city was a bustling hub of ambition, intrigue, and enough backstabbing to make Game of Thrones look like a friendly game of checkers. Economic challenges were brewing like a cauldron ready to spill over, and the Senate was more divided than a pizza at a family dinner. Let's talk about that Senate for a moment. It was the place where toga-clad elite men gathered to argue over the fate of the Republic, occasionally throwing in a fistfight for good measure. Comprised of around 300 to 600 members over time, the Senate was the ultimate boys' club, responsible for making decisions that affected the entire Roman world. But here's the kicker. While they were busy debating, Rome's economy was struggling like a gladiator, fighting with a wooden sword. Land ownership was concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy families, leaving the average Roman citizen to scrape by on whatever crumbs trickled down. The rich were richer than a Roman feast, while the poor were practically starving outside the banquet hall. This was the stage onto which our main character, Julius Caesar, made his entrance, not with a dramatic flourish, but with a shrewd understanding of the political landscape. Born in 100 BCE into the patrician Julian clan, Caesar was no stranger to privilege, yet his family wasn't exactly swimming in cash. His youth was marked by ambition and a healthy dose of cunning, which would serve him well in the cutthroat world of Roman politics. Young Julius, with his aquiline nose and piercing eyes, was a man with a plan. He saw the chessboard of Roman politics and decided he wanted to be the king, or at least a very powerful bishop. His military ambitions were as grand as a Roman triumphal arch, and he was willing to take calculated risks to make them a reality. In 84 BCE, Caesar married Cornelia, the daughter of a prominent political figure, which was less about love and more about solidifying his social standing. Love, in Caesar's world, was a luxury. Alliances were the currency that really mattered. Caesar's early career was a masterclass in political maneuvering. He knew that to climb Rome's greasy pole, he needed allies and a reputation that could withstand the inevitable mudslinging. Enter the military. Serving as a pontifex, one of Rome's religious offices, he dodged a proscription list, essentially a death warrant for political enemies, by proving himself indispensable. He later joined the army, where he quickly rose through the ranks faster than you could say, Veni, Vidi, Vici. His time in the military wasn't just about survival, it was about building a legacy. His campaigns in Asia Minor and subsequent decorations showed he wasn't just another patrician with a silver spoon. Now, let's talk about those clever political maneuvers that set him on the path to power. In 60 BCE, Caesar formed the first triumvirate with Pompey and Crassus, two of the most powerful men in Rome at the time. Think of it as the original power trio, a kind of Roman Avengers, if you will. Each had their own motives. Pompey wanted land for his veterans, Crassus sought wealth and influence, and Caesar, well, he wanted it all. This unofficial alliance was a strategic move to bypass the Senate's opposition, a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But Caesar wasn't content to play second fiddle in this trio forever. He was the kind of guy who saw a mountain and thought, I should conquer that. And conquer he did, in more ways than one. He was appointed governor of Gaul in 58 BCE, a region that was as unruly as a pack of wild boars. Over the next decade, he expanded Rome's territory to the Rhine and even crossed it for good measure, showing those Germanic tribes that Rome wasn't to be trifled with. These conquests not only filled Rome's coffers with tribute and slaves, but also bolstered Caesar's reputation as a military genius. While the Senate was fretting over Caesar's growing power, he was busy crafting his image. He wrote detailed commentaries on his campaigns, turning war reports into gripping tales of valor that would make any PR firm proud. It was like Caesar was his own propaganda machine, spinning his exploits to ensure the folks back home saw him as a hero rather than a threat. He understood the power of narrative and wielded it like a sword, slicing through the political fog to present himself as Rome's savior. In the end, Caesar's rise was a perfect storm of ambition, opportunity, and a little bit of luck. He navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics with the skill of a seasoned sailor, all the while keeping his eye on the ultimate prize, absolute power. But as history would eventually show, such power comes with a steep price, one that even the great Julius Caesar would have to pay. For now, though, he was on top of the world, and Rome would never be the same. As Caesar basked in the glow of his burgeoning power, the scene was set for his audacious campaigns in Gaul, a region that was less wine and cheese country and more warlord wonderland. This wasn't just about expanding Rome's borders. It was about carving Caesar's name into the annals of history with a metaphorical chisel of conquest. We're talking about a guy who wasn't content with merely raising the stakes. He wanted to own the whole table. Let's zero in on the year 58 BCE, when Caesar took his first decisive steps into Gaul like a kid in a candy store, except this candy came with fierce tribesmen ready to defend it. His first major encounter was with the Helvetii, a tribe that had decided to take their show on the road, migrating en masse across Gaul. Picture this: 368,000 people, including warriors, women, and children, all on a grand, chaotic road trip. Caesar, ever the opportunist, saw their movement as both a threat and a chance to flex his military muscles. In what became known as the Battle of Bibracte, Caesar's forces, numbering around 30,000 Roman soldiers, clashed with the Helvetii in a showdown that was part chess match, part demolition derby. The Romans, with their disciplined legions and tactical brilliance, emerged victorious, losing fewer than 6,000 soldiers compared to the 90,000 casualties suffered by the Helvetii. This wasn't just a battle, it was Caesar's way of saying, "Welcome to my world." But let's not sugarcoat it. Caesar was as much a spin doctor as he was a general. He penned his commentaries on the Gallic War, turning dry military reports into the ancient equivalent of a bestseller. With a quill as sharp as his sword, he painted his campaigns as epic tales of heroism, ensuring that the folks back in Rome saw him as a noble warrior rather than a power-hungry upstart. It was PR genius, with Caesar as the star of his own reality show set in the wilds of Gaul. Now, while Caesar was busy playing conqueror, he had to grapple with the nuts and bolts of running a military campaign. Moving massive armies wasn't as simple as booking a few hotel rooms and calling it a day. We're talking about the logistical nightmare of feeding, clothing, and arming tens of thousands of soldiers. Each Roman legion, consisting of about 5,000 men, required roughly 60,000 pounds of grain per month. Multiply that by 8 legions, and you're looking at a grain bill that would make any accountant weep. And then there was the matter of financing these adventures. War might be hell, but it sure isn't cheap. Caesar, ever the resourceful leader, used the spoils of war to fund his campaigns, with captured loot and slaves filling his coffers faster than a Roman banquet hall. Yet, money wasn't the only currency Caesar dealt in. He also traded in favors, promises, and quite often, good old-fashioned intimidation. His legions were loyal, not just because of their pay, but because of Caesar's knack for inspiring devotion. He was the kind of leader who would share hardship with his men, eating the same rations and sleeping in the same conditions, albeit with a slightly more comfortable bedroll. Back in Rome, Caesar's growing power was the talk of the town, or rather, the Senate. His successes in Gaul were like a double-edged sword. On one hand, they brought glory and wealth to Rome. On the other, they made Caesar look more like a kingmaker than a mere consul. The Senate, with its collection of wrinkled brows and twitchy fingers, was getting nervous. His actions were stirring the political part, and not everyone was keen on the idea of Caesar gaining even more influence. The political scene in Rome was a powder keg, and Caesar's antics were the sparks dancing dangerously close. The Senate's reaction was a mix of admiration, jealousy, and outright fear. It's like watching a star athlete who's also the coach, the team owner, and somehow the referee. Sure, it's impressive, but it also upsets the balance of power. And in Rome, balance was everything. Yet the myth of Caesar as an infallible leader glosses over the messier aspects of his ventures. Gaul wasn't just a series of glorious victories. It was a bloody grind through foreign terrain, with every inch of ground contested fiercely by its indigenous peoples. His campaigns weren't just about military genius. They were also about brutal realities and hard choices, some that would make a Roman blush, and others that would make even the most hardened soldier wince. Take, for example, the Battle of Gergovia in 52 BCE, where Caesar suffered one of his rare defeats at the hands of the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix. The battle was a tactical nightmare, with the Romans failing to dislodge the entrenched Gauls from their high-ground fortress. Caesar's forces suffered significant losses, with around 700 Roman soldiers killed. This wasn't just a setback, it was a reminder that even the greatest military minds could falter. But like any seasoned gambler, Caesar knew when to cut his losses and regroup he did. Later that same year, Caesar faced Vercingetorix again in the monumental Battle of Alesia, with roughly 60,000 Roman soldiers against 80,000 Gauls. Caesar employed a brilliant strategy of encirclement, building fortifications around the Gallic stronghold while simultaneously fending off relief forces. It was a masterclass in siege warfare, and after a brutal month-long standoff, Vercingetorix surrendered. The victory wasn't just a military triumph. It was a political masterstroke, solidifying Caesar's reputation as a commander who could snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Yet, behind the glory and the gilded images of triumph, the reality was stark and unrelenting. The Gallic wars resulted in the deaths of over 1 million people, with countless more enslaved or displaced. This was conquest by any means necessary, with Caesar as the ruthless architect, an ambition-driven juggernaut who understood that history remembers the victors, but often glosses over the cost of their victories. In the end, Caesar's campaigns in Gaul were a complex tapestry of ambition, strategy, and raw human endeavor. He was a man who could turn the tides of battle with a single command and sway public opinion with a stroke of his pen. As he wrapped up his conquests in 50 BCE, the stage was set for the next chapter in his relentless pursuit of power, a chapter that would bring him back to Rome with more than just tales of glory. It would bring him face to face with the political storm he had helped create. But that's a story for another day, as the wheels of history continue to turn, with Caesar at their center, driving forward with unstoppable force. As the dust settled in Gaul and Caesar eyed Rome like a cat sizing up an unattended fish market, the stakes were about to skyrocket. Enter 49 BCE, an election year in Rome, and Caesar had his sights set on the consulship, a position of immense power, and one he'd previously held back in 59 BCE. But here's the kicker. Running for consul while commanding an army in Gaul was as tricky as juggling flaming torches while blindfolded. Rome's political scene wasn't just a minefield. It was a minefield with a live audience and judges scrutinizing your every move. So here we are, with Caesar at a crossroads. Figuratively, sure, but also quite literally. The Rubicon River, a Mardis stream marking the boundary between Cisalpine Gaul and Italy proper, was about to become the most famous creek in history. The Roman Senate, with all the grace and tact of a herd of elephants in a china shop, had ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen if he wanted to run for office. Simple, right, except that walking into Rome without his legions would be like walking into a lion's den wearing a meat suit. Caesar, being the savvy operator he was, understood the risks. Crossing the Rubicon with his army would be an act of war, a declaration as bold and final as a mic drop at a rap battle. Yet the alternative, returning to Rome alone, could mean political and literal oblivion. His enemies in the Senate, particularly the staunchly conservative faction led by Pompey, were sharpening their knives, both figuratively and quite possibly literally. For Caesar, it was a classic case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And so the die was cast, literally. Alia iacta est, he reportedly declared as he crossed the Rubicon. It's the kind of phrase that resonates through history, despite questions about whether he actually said it at all. But let's be honest, it makes for a great story, and it's far more dramatic than whoops. Here we go. By January 10, 49 BCE, Caesar and his veteran legions had crossed into Italy, sparking a civil war that would forever change the Roman Republic. His army wasn't just any group of soldiers, mind you. These were battle-hardened veterans, men who had followed Caesar through thick and thin, through the muck of Gaul and the frigid waters of the Rhine. Their loyalty was ironclad, rooted in the promise of land, wealth, and the charisma of a leader who had shared their hardships. They weren't just an army. They were Caesar's personal legion of zealots ready to reshape the political landscape of Rome. The Senate, caught off guard by Caesar's decisiveness, scrambled like a colony of ants whose hill had been kicked over. Pompey, the Senate's designated champion and former ally of Caesar, was tasked with defending the Republic. But here's the twist. Despite his reputation as a formidable general, Pompey wasn't exactly prepared for a showdown. His forces were scattered, his allies hesitant, and his confidence, well, it was about as solid as a politician's promise. Caesar, on the other hand, moved with the speed and precision of a military genius. In a matter of weeks, he had secured key cities like Ariminum, Mard and Rimini, and marched on to Rome, all while Pompey and the Senate scuttled off to Greece to regroup. It was like watching a chess grandmaster play against someone who forgot where they left the board. By March 49 BCE, Caesar had control of Italy, and he hadn't even broken a sweat, figuratively speaking, of course. But let's not get carried away with the romantic notion of Caesar as Rome's liberator. The reality was a tad messier. This wasn't a noble quest for justice. It was a power grab, pure and simple. Caesar's actions, while bold and strategically brilliant, set a precedent that would haunt Rome for generations. The Republic, already teetering under the weight of corruption and civil strife, was now on a collision course with autocracy, and there was no turning back. Now, let's talk economics for a second. War isn't just about swords clashing and egos bruising. It's about cold, hard cash. Caesar knew this and took measures to secure Rome's finances. He seized the state treasury, a move as audacious as it was necessary. It wasn't just gold he was after, it was legitimacy, because in the ancient world, as in ours, money talks louder than a senator's speech. Meanwhile, in Greece, Pompey was rallying his forces, gathering support from the eastern provinces. He wasn't just going to roll over and let Caesar waltz into total control. The stage was being set for a showdown that would make Caesar's previous battles look like mere skirmishes. As the Roman world braced itself for conflict, Caesar continued his campaign of consolidation and propaganda. He portrayed himself as a champion of the people, a defender of Roman traditions against a corrupt and self-serving Senate. It was a narrative that resonated with the masses, especially those who had long been disenfranchised by the elite's stranglehold on power. But let's not kid ourselves. Caesar's populism was less about ideology and more about securing his own rule. The civil war that followed wasn't a neat affair of good versus evil. It was a brutal contest where alliances shifted like sand in the wind. Caesar's forces clashed with Pompey's in a series of battles that tested both men's mettle. It was a war fought with legions and letters, as propaganda flew as fast as arrows. Each side sought to sway public opinion, a reminder that in politics, the battle for hearts and minds is just as crucial as the clash of armies. In the end, Caesar's gamble at the Rubicon wasn't just a roll of the dice. It was a calculated risk that paid off spectacularly, reshaping the Roman world in his image. But the cost was steep, and the Republic, once a beacon of democracy, or at least a version of it, was on life support. Caesar's actions laid the foundation for an empire that would stretch across continents, yet they also sowed the seeds of its eventual decline. As we leave Caesar on the brink of empire, with the Republic's fate hanging in the balance, it's clear that his story is far from over. The Rubicon was just the beginning, a prologue to an epic tale of ambition, power, and the relentless march of history. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises to be just as riveting. After all, in the theatre of Roman politics, the show must go on, and Caesar was nothing if not a showman. As Caesar stood on the brink of reshaping Rome, with his triumph at Pharsalus in 48 BCE firmly under his belt, the world was his oyster, or perhaps more accurately, his empire. Pompey, defeated and fleeing to Egypt, met his end not with a hero's farewell, but with a stab in the back, quite literally. Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy Roman 13, hoping to curry favor with Caesar, offered Pompey's head on a platter, a move that was as ill-conceived as serving cold soup at a Roman banquet. Caesar, ever the pragmatist, was less impressed by the gruesome gift than by the opportunity it presented to insert himself into Egyptian politics. Now, let's not sugarcoat this. Caesar's entry into Egypt wasn't purely strategic. The allure of Cleopatra, with her intellect and charm, was more seductive than any promise of political alliance. Cue one of history's most famous romances, or at least one of its most politically advantageous liaisons. Cleopatra, seeking a powerful ally to secure her throne against her brother's ambitions, found in Caesar a partner who could provide military might and legitimacy. For Caesar, Cleopatra was more than just a queen. She was a means to extend his influence into the wealth and grain-rich lands of Egypt, a dalliance with a purpose, if you will. Their union resulted in a son, Caesarion, although, let's be honest, in a world where paternity tests were about as common as unicorns, the exact lineage was more a matter of political assertion than scientific fact. Nevertheless, their relationship was the stuff of legends, later immortalized in art, literature, and a fair share of historical exaggeration. It was a classic case of power couple, ancient style, with the added bonus of geopolitical intrigue. Back in Rome, the Senate was grappling with the reality of Caesar's unchecked power. His return to the city in 46 BCE was marked not by a hero's welcome, but by a tense acknowledgement of his dominance. The civil war had left the Republic in tatters, and Caesar's task was nothing short of Herculean, to rebuild and reform a system that was buckling under its own corruption and inefficiency. But Caesar wasn't just any reformer. He was a man with a vision as grand as his ego. Let's dive into the reforms, starting with the calendar. Yes, the calendar. Caesar, ever the pragmatist, tackled the mess that was the Roman lunar calendar with the precision of a military campaign. The Julian calendar, introduced in 46 BCE, was a leap year marvel that brought order to the chaos of timekeeping. By implementing a 365-day year with a leap day every 4 years, Caesar ensured that the equinoxes wouldn't drift around like lost sheep. It might seem mundane, but this reform was revolutionary, affecting everything from agriculture to religious festivals. It was the kind of practical improvement that solidified his image as a ruler who could bring order to chaos. Economically, Caesar's reforms were as bold as they were necessary. He addressed the crippling debt crisis that had left many Romans at the mercy of creditors. By capping interest rates and forgiving a portion of debts, he offered relief to the beleaguered citizens while, unsurprisingly, ruffling the feathers of Rome's elite. This wasn't just benevolence, it was a shrewd move to win popular support. After all, happy citizens were less likely to revolt, and Caesar needed stability to push through his broader agenda. In terms of governance, Caesar took steps to centralize power and streamline the Roman bureaucracy. He expanded the Senate to 900 members, a move that diluted the power of the old aristocracy and filled the ranks with his supporters. It was a classic case of keep your friends close and your potential enemies closer. By increasing the number of provincial governors and standardizing tax collection, he sought to prevent the kind of corruption that had plagued the Republic. These measures were as much about consolidating control as they were about improving efficiency. However, let's not get swept away by the romantic notion of Caesar as a benevolent dictator. His reforms were driven by a desire for stability, sure, but they were also about solidifying his grip on power. Caesar was a man who understood that the facade of democracy could mask an autocracy, and he wielded this understanding like a master puppeteer. His relationship with the Senate, once a bastion of republican ideals, was tense at best. While he filled the ranks with loyalists, the old guard resented their diminished influence. The Senate, once the heart of Roman politics, was reduced to a rubber stamp for Caesar's edicts. Yet, for all his reforms and political savvy, Caesar was ultimately a man out of time. The title of dictator for life, granted in 44 BCE, was a double-edged sword. It symbolized his ultimate authority, but also painted a target on his back. The irony of Caesar's rise is that his consolidation of power, designed to stabilize Rome, sowed seeds of distrust and discontent among those who saw him as a tyrant. The whispers of conspiracy, once confined to shadowy corners, grew louder, setting the stage for his dramatic downfall. In the end, Caesar's legacy is a tapestry of ambition, reform, and ruthless pragmatism. He was a man who could bend the world to his will, yet his vision for Rome was both his greatest strength and his Achilles' heel. As the Ides of March loomed on the horizon, the balance of power he had so carefully crafted was about to be tested, with consequences that would echo through history. But that's a tale for another time, as Caesar's story continues to unfold, driven by the relentless tide of ambition and fate. So, stay tuned as we dive deeper into the final act of this epic saga, where the stakes are as high as the drama is intense, and the lessons of history are as poignant as they are timeless. As the Ides of March loomed on the horizon, the balance of power Julius Caesar had so carefully crafted was about to be tested, with consequences that would echo through history. It was the ultimate irony. A man who had built his legacy on decisive action and strategic brilliance was about to be undone by the very system he sought to control. On March 15, 44 BCE, Caesar strode into the Senate, perhaps unaware that his ambitious reforms had sown both admiration and treachery into the fabric of Roman politics. Rumor has it that Caesar had been warned about the Ides, but let's cut through the drama for a second. It's not the prophecy that did him in, it was politics. And politics in Rome was a blood sport, with daggers instead of debates. The Senate, that bastion of republican virtue, had become a cauldron of resentment. Some senators viewed Caesar's title of dictator for life as a betrayal of the republic's foundational principles. Others were simply terrified of his power. The conspiracy against him was less a unified cabal and more a loose patchwork of senators bound by fear and desperation. The assassination itself was a scene straight out of a Shakespearean tragedy. As Caesar entered the theater of Pompey, he was surrounded by over 60 conspirators, led by Brutus, Cassius, and other senators who fancied themselves saviors of the Republic. Ironically, the very place named after one of Caesar's defeated rivals became the stage for his downfall. The conspirators struck with a flurry of daggers, delivering 23 wounds in a brutal reminder that in politics, loyalty is often as fleeting as a Roman summer. Now, let's not romanticize this moment as the death of a tyrant for the cause of liberty. The reality was murkier. Sure, some conspirators genuinely believed they were restoring the Republic, but let's face it, others were just as power-hungry as Caesar. The assassination sparked chaos rather than order, plunging Rome into yet another power struggle. In the immediate aftermath, the conspirators might have expected cheers and laurel wreaths, but what they got was a city on the brink of civil war. Following Caesar's death, the power vacuum was as vast as the Roman Empire itself. The Senate found itself scrambling for stability, and Rome was once again thrown into the throes of political upheaval. The conspirators had hoped that by removing Caesar, they would restore the Republic, but instead, they unleashed a new wave of civil discord. Enter Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally, and a man with an eye for opportunity as sharp as any blade used on the Ides. Antony seized the moment, delivering a funeral oration that turned public sentiment against the conspirators faster than you could say, "Et tu, brute." With his impassioned speech, Antony ignited the flames of popular support for Caesar's cause, casting the assassins as traitors to Rome. It was a masterstroke of rhetoric and manipulation, showcasing the power of words to sway the masses, an ancient precursor to a Twitter storm, if you will. But Antony wasn't the only player in this high-stakes game of political chess. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, stepped onto the scene. At just 18, Octavius, or Augustus as he would later be known, was about as green as a Roman olive. But what he lacked in experience, he made up for in shrewdness and an uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics. Aligning himself with Antony and Lepidus, he formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BCE, a power pact designed to hunt down Caesar's assassins and consolidate control. The triumvirate's first order of business, a little thing called the proscriptions, essentially a hit list of political enemies, complete with asset seizures and a bounty on your head. It was a grim reminder that in Rome, politics was often a matter of life and death. The triumvirs pursued their foes with ruthless efficiency, culminating in the decisive Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, where Brutus and Cassius met their end. The Republic's supposed defenders lay defeated, and the stage was set for a new era. Yet, this wasn't a return to Republican glory. It was the dawn of empire. The power struggle between Antony and Octavian was like a slow-motion train wreck, with each man vying for supremacy in a contest that would reshape the Roman world. Despite their initial alliance, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Antony, with his eyes on the east and his heart entangled with Cleopatra, represented a vision of Rome as a Mediterranean superpower. Octavian, on the other hand, embodied the disciplined, traditional values of Rome, positioning himself as the guardian of its legacy. Their rivalry came to a head at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, a naval showdown that pitted Antony and Cleopatra against Octavian's forces. Octavian's victory was as much about strategy as it was about optics. By portraying Antony as a traitor, bewitched by a foreign queen, Octavian captured the Roman imagination and secured his position as the uncontested ruler of Rome. It was a political masterclass, with Octavian emerging as the first Roman emperor in all but name. In 27 BCE, Octavian was granted the title of Augustus, signaling the birth of the Roman Empire. This was no mere rebranding. It was a fundamental transformation of the Roman state. Augustus established a system of governance that combined elements of autocracy with the republican facade, ensuring that power was concentrated in his hands while maintaining the illusion of senatorial authority. The Senate became more of a ceremonial body, rubber-stamping decisions rather than shaping them. It was a clever balancing act, one that would define Roman politics for centuries. Caesar's legacy, then, is a complex tapestry woven from threads of ambition, reform, and ruthless pragmatism. His assassination may have been intended to save the Republic, but it instead paved the way for the Empire, a testament to the unintended consequences of political maneuvering. Caesar's rise and fall illustrate the perils of power unchecked and the fragility of political systems in the face of ambition. The myths surrounding Caesar are as enduring as they are alluring. He's often cast as the quintessential tragic hero, a visionary undone by his own hubris. Yet the reality is far more nuanced. Caesar was a product of his time, a man who understood that power was as much about perception as it was about action. His reforms laid the groundwork for the stability of the empire, even as they dismantled the Republic's foundations. So, as we wrap up our tale, it's worth pondering the lessons of Caesar's life and legacy. In a world where power and politics often dance a dangerous tango, his story serves as a reminder of the delicate balance between ambition and responsibility. Julius Caesar may have been a master of the political game, but his legacy is a testament to the unpredictable nature of history, a saga where the lines between hero and villain blur, and the past echoes into the future with lessons still relevant today. And there you have it. Julius Caesar, a man whose name still resonates through the ages, not just as a conqueror or a reformer, but as a pivotal figure in the grand drama of human history. His life was a whirlwind of triumphs and tragedies, driven by the relentless march of ambition. In the end, Caesar's story teaches us that while empires rise and fall, the quest for power remains eternal, a timeless dance as ancient as Rome itself. Amidst the swirling sands and scorching sun of ancient Iran, the Parthian Empire unfurled its might like a peacock showing off its plumage, spanning from 247 BC right until AD 224. Now, if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around that timeline, just remember it lasted longer than most empires and marriages combined. This empire wasn't just a footnote in an ancient history book, but a behemoth stretching its influence over a region that today would require several visas to traverse. We're talking about a good chunk of modern-day Iran, as well as parts of Iraq, Turkey, and Afghanistan. These guys didn't just lay claim to land. They practically had a real estate empire, long before it was cool. Now, Imagine being an ancient cartographer trying to map this colossal territory. Those old-school mapmakers likely would have given anything for a GPS or Google Earth. Instead, they had to rely on a combination of hearsay and a questionable sense of direction. Think about it, a map that might have been more Picasso than accurate geography. And yet, despite these limitations, the Parthians managed to keep control, blending cultures like a masterful DJ mixing tracks at a top nightclub. This blend of cultures was no accident. It was the secret sauce that made Parthian society tick. The empire sat smack dab on the Silk Road, the ancient highway of trade and cultural exchange. We're talking about a lane busier than a mall on Black Friday, bringing in influences from the Greeks, Persians, and even a dash of Indian flair. This cultural cocktail wasn't just a nice-to-have. It was the foundation of their architectural prowess. Parthian architecture was like a mixtape of the greatest hits from all around the known world. They borrowed Greek columns, Persian domes, and a little bit of flair from here and there. But they weren't just copycats. Oh no, they were innovators, creating something entirely new from the old. This unique blend was the architectural identity of the Parthian Empire. They crafted buildings that were not only functional and majestic, but also a testament to the empire's ability to absorb and adapt. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of their architectural achievements, let's set the scene. The Parthians were part of the Arsacid dynasty, named after its founder, Arsaces I, who kicked things off around 247 BC. These guys didn't just stumble into power. They seized it with the kind of strategic cunning that would make a chess grandmaster nod in approval. They overthrew the Seleucid Empire, which itself was a leftover from Alexander the Great's conquests. The Parthians were like the underdogs who crashed the party and ended up owning the house. Politically, the Parthian Empire was ruled by a king, but don't picture a solitary ruler lording over his subjects from a distant throne. No, the Parthian court was more Game of Thrones than Downton Abbey, a place of intrigue, alliances, and the occasional betrayal. The king's power wasn't absolute, as the empire was a patchwork of semi-autonomous regions, each with its own local rulers. Think of it as a medieval version of a federal system, where local governance was a matter of practicality, not just philosophy. Economically, the Parthians were no slouches either. They were savvy merchants, leveraging their geographic position to control trade routes. The Silk Road was their golden goose, a bustling artery of commerce that brought wealth and exotic goods from China to Rome. Silk, spices, precious stones. If it glittered or tasted good, chances are it passed through Parthian hands. This trade wasn't just a source of wealth, but a conduit for cultural exchange, enriching the empire and its architectural sensibilities. Speaking of architecture, the Parthians had a knack for building things that would make even the most jaded Instagrammer whip out their phone for a quick snap. Their use of Iwan, a massive vaulted hall open on one end, was revolutionary, influencing Islamic architecture for centuries to come. The Parthian penchant for grandiosity wasn't just about looking good. It was a statement of power, a way to say, we're here, we're mighty, and we've got the bricks to prove it. Now, let's bust a myth or two while we're here. The romantic notion of ancient empires as harmonious utopias is about as accurate as a Hollywood historical epic. The Parthian Empire, like any other, was a place of contradictions, of splendor and squalor existing side by side. It was a realm where artistic innovation thrived even as political intrigue simmered beneath the surface. The harsh realities of life in the ancient world, disease, conflict, and the whims of nature, were constant companions. Yet amidst these challenges, the Parthians managed to create a legacy that has endured millennia. In summary, the Parthian Empire was a marvel of its time, a sprawling, multicultural powerhouse that left an indelible mark on history. Its architectural achievements were more than just stone and mortar. They were a reflection of an empire that knew how to blend, adapt, and innovate. And as we continue this journey through their architectural wonders, keep in mind that every arch, every column, and every dome tells a story, not just of the Parthians themselves, but of the world they helped shape. Speaking of stories, let's dive into the architectural exploits of the Parthian Empire, where they didn't just build structures, they crafted experiences. Take the Iwan, for example. This wasn't just a building. It was the ancient equivalent of saying, look what we can do. Imagine a massive vaulted hall, open on one end, that could serve as a venue for everything from royal proclamations to what I can only assume were some seriously epic parties. Picture the acoustics, perfect for a concert today, and you wouldn't even need those overpriced noise-cancelling headphones. Now, when it comes to materials, the Parthians were the ultimate early adopters, if you will. They used brick and mortar, like a modern-day DIY enthusiast uses duct tape, creatively, and with a hint of defiance against the status quo. While the Romans were busy patting themselves on the back for their marble-covered opulence, the Parthians were proving that bricks weren't just for kids and their Lego sets. These guys managed to create structures that were not only beautiful, but also stood the test of time, demonstrating that durability and aesthetics could go hand in hand. The Parthians' use of brick and mortar was like a middle finger to the Romans' architectural grandeur. Sure, marble is nice, but have you tried building with something that's actually practical? The Parthian Empire was all about functionality. They didn't just want to look good, they wanted to last. And last they did, with structures that have weathered millennia and still manage to impress today. It's like they were saying, hey, Rome, you might have your Colosseum, but we've got buildings that won't crumble at the first sign of an earthquake. This wasn't just about practicality, though. The Parthians had a flair for the dramatic, and their architecture reflected that. Their structures were grand, with towering archways and expansive halls that made you feel like you were walking through a space designed for giants. And in a way, you were. These were buildings meant to inspire awe, not just because of their size, but because of the sheer audacity it took to build them. They were statements of power, and you can bet they made quite the impression on anyone who dared to question the might of the Parthian Empire. But let's not get too romantic about it. The Parthians, like everyone else, had their share of construction blunders. Not every Iwan was a masterpiece, just like not every DIY project results in a Pinterest-worthy success. Some projects likely ended with more than a few oops moments. The thing is, in the ancient world, you couldn't just run down to the local hardware store to fix your mistakes. If you miscalculated the weight distribution on your vaulted ceiling, well, you might end up with an Iwan that looked more like a modern art installation gone wrong. The Parthians, however, were nothing if not resourceful, learning from these missteps and turning them into opportunities for innovation. Economically, these architectural feats were no small feat. Construction required resources, lots of them, and the Parthians knew how to make them work. They tapped into their vast trade networks, ensuring they had access to the best materials and craftsmen from across their empire and beyond. It's like they had Amazon Prime for building supplies, except their delivery times were probably a bit longer, and they involved camels instead of delivery trucks. The point is, the Parthians were savvy. They knew how to leverage their position on the Silk Road to bring in what they needed, whether it was a shipment of bricks or the expertise of a master architect. And let's not overlook the social and political factors at play here. The Parthian Empire wasn't just a monolith. It was a tapestry of cultures and people, each bringing something unique to the table. This diversity was reflected in their architecture, which borrowed from Greek, Persian, and other influences to create something uniquely Parthian. In a world where cultural appropriation was more about survival than scandal, the Parthians were like the ultimate remix artists, blending styles to create structures that were as eclectic as they were impressive. But here's a myth worth busting. The idea that the Parthians were somehow less sophisticated than their Roman counterparts because they didn't have the same penchant for marble. In reality, the Parthians were just playing a different game. They understood that true architectural supremacy wasn't just about what you built, but how you built it. Their structures were innovative, blending form and function in ways that challenged the status quo and left a legacy that would influence architecture for centuries to come. So, while the Romans were busy showing off their shiny marble facades, the Parthians were quietly redefining what it meant to build something of lasting impact. Their architecture wasn't just about grandeur. It was about resilience, adaptability, and a little bit of good old-fashioned showmanship. They built not just for the present, but for the future, creating spaces that were meant to endure long after the empire itself had faded into history. In the end, the Parthian Empire was a testament to the power of innovation and adaptation, using architecture as a way to express their identity and assert their place in the ancient world. They might not have had the same level of fame as their Roman counterparts, but their contributions to the world of architecture were no less significant. And as we continue to explore the grandiosity of Parthian architecture, remember that every brick, every arch, and every hall tells a story of a people who dared to dream big and build even bigger. And speaking of dreaming big and building even bigger, let's mosey over to Hatra, an ancient city that was basically the Las Vegas of its time, albeit without the neon lights and slot machines. Nestled in what is now modern-day Iraq, Hatra was a spectacular blend of cultural influences, a bustling hub that made the Parthian Empire stand out from the crowd. This wasn't just a city, it was an architectural rock star that knew how to draw a crowd. Imagine a place where the columns didn't just hold up buildings, but were grand statements of defiance against gravity itself. Hatra wasn't built overnight, nor was it a solo act. This city was a testament to the Parthians' knack for turning cultural borrowing into an art form. Take the temples, for example. These structures weren't just places of worship. They were the ancient world's answer to a red carpet event, glitzy, grand, and designed to drop jaws. The Temple of Shamash, dedicated to the sun god, was the centerpiece, an architectural blockbuster that combined Greek, Roman, and Mesopotamian styles into a single, harmonious composition. You could say it was the Bohemian Rhapsody of ancient temples, an epic blend of styles that somehow just worked. Hatra wasn't just about aesthetics, though. It was a strategic fortress, a stone-and-mortar Swiss army knife of the ancient world. Its thick walls were built to withstand sieges, giving invading armies a run for their money, quite literally. The walls were about 5 miles in circumference, with a thickness that would make a modern-day bunker blush. This was no mere defensive measure. It was an architectural power move, a way for the Parthians to say, "Come at us, if you dare." But let's not get too carried away with romanticizing these fortifications. Archaeological evidence suggests that Hatra, for all its grandeur, was as much about survival as it was about splendor. The city was located on the fringes of the Parthian Empire, a hotspot for conflict with Rome. This wasn't just a gleaming jewel, it was a frontline fortress, where the threat of invasion was as constant as the desert sun. The strategic importance of Hatra can't be overstated. It was a bulwark against Roman expansion, a literal line in the sand. Yet, Hatra was also a beacon of cultural exchange. The city's blend of architectural styles was a reflection of its diverse population, a multicultural melting pot where traders, artisans, and travelers mingled. This wasn't just a city. It was a living, breathing testament to the Parthian Empire's ability to foster cultural fusion. The bustling markets of Hatra were likely a sensory overload, full of exotic goods and sounds, a testament to the city's status as a major trading hub. And let's not forget the economic impact. The wealth generated by trade in Hatra was vital for funding the Parthian military machine and their grand architectural projects alike. Now, let's bust a myth or two, shall we? The idea that ancient cities like Hatra were invincible fortresses is about as accurate as claiming a sandcastle can withstand a tidal wave. While Hatra did withstand several Roman sieges, it eventually fell to the Sassanids in 241 AD. The city's fall was a harsh reminder that even the grandest of fortresses could crumble under the right circumstances, a reality check that no amount of Parthian bravado could change. The legend of Hatra's invincibility is a romantic narrative, but the archaeological evidence tells a story of resilience and eventual vulnerability. As we peer through the dust of centuries past, it's clear that Hatra's significance wasn't just military or economic, it was also ceremonial. The temples and public spaces were more than just architectural marvels. They were the heart of the city's spiritual and social life. This was where the pulse of the city could be felt, where rituals and ceremonies brought people together in a shared sense of identity and purpose. In a world where religion and politics were often two sides of the same coin, these structures served as both spiritual sanctuaries and seats of power. The ceremonial importance of Hatra was evident in its intricate reliefs and carvings, which depicted deities, mythological scenes, and royal iconography. These artistic expressions weren't just decorative, they were a form of storytelling, a way for the Parthians to assert their cultural identity and religious beliefs. The carvings were like ancient Instagram posts, capturing moments and messages for all to see. And just like today's social media, they were designed to impress, influence, and occasionally enrage. Economically, Hatra was a linchpin for the Parthian Empire, a testament to the power of location, location, location. Situated at the crossroads of major trade routes, the city was a magnet for merchants and travelers alike. This wasn't just a place to pass through. It was a destination in its own right, where commerce and culture flourished side by side. The wealth generated by Hatra's trade wasn't just a byproduct of its location. It was a driving force behind the city's prosperity and architectural ambition. But let's not overlook the harsh realities of life in Hatra. While the city was a beacon of prosperity, it was also a place where the challenges of the ancient world were ever present. Disease, conflict, and the whims of nature were constant threats, reminding the inhabitants that even in a city as grand as Hatra, life was anything but predictable. The romantic notion of an ancient utopia is just that, a notion. The reality was far more complex, and at times brutal. Yet amidst these challenges, the people of Hatra thrived, their resilience a testament to the enduring spirit of the Parthian Empire. The city's legacy lives on in the ruins that still stand today, haunting reminder of a world long gone but never forgotten. Hatra was more than just a city. It was a symbol of Parthian ingenuity, a microcosm of an empire that knew how to build both for the present and the future. As we continue our journey through the architectural wonders of the Parthian Empire, remember that every stone, every column, and every arch tells a story, not just of the Parthians themselves, but of the world they helped shape. The tale of Hatra is one of many, a chapter in the larger narrative of an empire that dared to dream big and build even bigger. And as we delve deeper into the architectural feats of this ancient powerhouse, brace yourself for more stories of innovation, resilience, and a little bit of good old-fashioned showmanship. So, in the architectural wonderland that was the Parthian Empire, we've established that their buildings were not just about aesthetics, but were also deeply rooted in the empire's economic and political ambitions. Now, if you're thinking, well, that sounds suspiciously like modern infrastructure projects, you're not far off. The Parthians were all about that show-and-tell life. Imagine the Silk Road as their personal ATM, dispensing wealth with every caravan that trundled through. This wasn't just any trade route. It was the ancient world's version of Wall Street, except with fewer suits and more camels. Let's talk numbers. The Silk Road stretched over 4,000 miles, connecting the east and the west like some ancient superhighway. This wasn't your neighborhood shortcut. It was more like the autobahn of antiquity. And the Parthians, they were the toll booth operators, raking in revenue from trade like it was going out of style. Silk, spices, exotic fruits, and precious stones, all these treasures passed through Parthian hands, leaving a trail of gold coins in their wake. You could say they had a good thing going, and boy, did they know how to spend it. The wealth generated from this bustling trade route was the lifeblood of their construction projects. Imagine the Parthian kings sitting in their palaces, scrolling through their mental wish lists of architectural marvels. I fancy a new temple, one might say, or perhaps a new one that'll make even the guards stop and stare. And why not? When your coffers are overflowing like a Black Friday sale at a megastore, you can afford to dream big, but let's not sugarcoat it. These projects weren't just about artistic expression or religious devotion. Nope, they were also hefty slices of political propaganda. The Parthians were masters at using architecture as a billboard, a way to say to the world, look at us, we're not just surviving, we're thriving. Each grand structure was a statement of power, an advertisement for the empire's might and stability. Think of it as the ancient version of erecting skyscrapers with your name plastered across the top, subtle, yet undeniably effective. Take the city of Ctesiphon, for example, the Parthian capital, and a veritable architectural playground. The crown jewel here was the Tak Kasra, the largest single-span brick arch in the world. This wasn't just a building, it was a power flex. The arch itself stretched over 82 feet wide and soared 115 feet high, a feat of engineering that made visitors feel like ants in a giant's lair. The message was clear. The Parthians had the wealth, the workforce, and the know-how to pull off the unimaginable. Now, here comes the myth-busting part. While it's tempting to romanticize these constructions as mere symbols of a golden age, the reality was a tad grittier. Building on such a scale required not just money, but manpower, lots of it. And let's be real, labor conditions in ancient times were about as far from today's OSHA standards as you can get. It wasn't all rosy. Thousands of workers toiled in the sun, chiseling stone and laying bricks, sometimes with little more than a slap on the back for a job well done. The political implications of these projects were as towering as the structures themselves. In an empire where power was as fragile as a clay pot, architecture became a tool to cement authority. The more impressive the building, the more it screamed, "We're here to stay." It was a calculated move to keep regional rulers in check and remind them who was boss. The Parthians understood that to rule effectively, you needed more than just military might. You needed to win hearts and minds. And what better way than through monumental displays of architectural prowess? Let's not forget the economic ripple effects of these grand designs. The construction boom created jobs, stimulated local economies, and attracted skilled craftsmen from across the empire. It was like an ancient New Deal, but instead of highways and bridges, you got iwans and ziggurats. This influx of labor and resources wasn't just about building. It was about building a legacy, a testament to Parthian ingenuity and might. But here's the kicker. For all their architectural achievements, the Parthians were not immune to the pitfalls of over-ambition. Just as in modern times, where infrastructure projects can balloon into financial black holes, the Parthians occasionally found themselves in over their heads. Mismanagement, corruption, and the sheer cost of maintaining such grand structures could strain even the healthiest of treasuries. It's a tale as old as time, one that echoes through the annals of history whenever humans dream a little too big. So, as we continue our jaunt through Parthian architecture, it's clear that these structures were more than just pretty faces. They were complex symbols of economic power, political ambition, and cultural identity. Each building was a chapter in the story of an empire that dared to defy the limits of its time. And while it's easy to be dazzled by the grandeur, it's equally important to remember the human stories behind the stone, the laborers, the architects, the kings who wielded architecture like a scepter to rule an empire. In the next part, we'll continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of Parthian architecture, exploring how these monumental feats were more than just stone and mortar. They were the very essence of an empire striving to leave its mark on the world. But for now, let's savor the irony that while the Parthians built for eternity, even the grandest of arches can't escape the sands of time. Yet their legacy endures, a testament to the enduring power of vision and ambition. Stay tuned for more tales from the annals of Parthian history, where the past is not just a foreign country, but a mirror reflecting the eternal truths of human endeavor. And now, let's dive headfirst into the legacy pool, because the Parthian Empire isn't just some dusty relic of the past. It's the architectural ancestor haunting your local shopping mall. Yep, those arches you stroll under while sipping overpriced lattes owe a nod of gratitude to the Parthians. Their ingenuity in engineering left an indelible mark, one that echoes in the curves of modern structures around the globe. But why did these ancient innovations have such staying power? Well, the Parthians, with their unyielding brick and mortar, pioneered the use of arches and vaults in ways that were both practical and aesthetically pleasing, setting a precedent that future empires couldn't resist copying. You see, the ingenious Iwan, the Parthians' architectural ace, wasn't just a pretty face. This grand, vaulted space, open on one end, was the blueprint for countless buildings that followed, from Islamic mosques to European cathedrals. Just picture it. A design so robust that it survived the test of time, much like your grandfather's questionable fashion choices. The genius of the Iwan lay in its versatility, and its ability to turn even the most mundane of gatherings into epic events worthy of a Netflix special. But let's not get carried away with the allure of architectural legacy without acknowledging the gritty truths. Yes, the Parthians were ahead of their time, but their innovations weren't purely altruistic. These masterpieces were power plays, crafted to intimidate and awe both friend and foe. They told a story of dominance and control, a narrative that transcended mere construction to become a crucial tool in the empire's political arsenal. It was architecture as a form of statecraft, as essential as the crown on a king's head. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and you'll see the Parthian influence striding confidently into the heart of Islamic architecture. The Umayyads and the Abbasids took one look at those majestic Iwans and thought, now, that's something we can work with. The adoption of Parthian styles wasn't just a nod to the past. It was an acknowledgement of timeless genius. Their use of expansive halls and intricate stucco work became the hallmarks of a new era in architecture, one that bridged the ancient and medieval worlds with grace and grandeur. Even the Romans, those stalwarts of marble and excess, couldn't help but admire the Parthian flair. They may have had their own grand designs, but the influence of Parthian engineering can be seen in Roman vaults and arches, proving that even the mightiest empires know a good thing when they see it. It's like an ancient architectural game of who wore it best, with everyone borrowing a bit from everyone else, and the Parthians holding their own as trendsetters. Now, let's sprinkle in a bit of myth-busting, because nothing says history like peeling back the layers of romanticized narrative. The Parthians, often overshadowed by the glamour of Rome and the mystique of Persia, are sometimes relegated to the sidelines of popular history. Yet, the reality is they were innovators who broke the mold. The myth that they were merely a bridge between greater empires is about as accurate as calling Da Vinci a doodler. The Parthians were architects of their destiny, shaping not just buildings, but the very concept of public spaces that resonate even today. The economic impact of their architectural prowess wasn't limited to the moment. The Parthians knew that a sturdy structure was an investment, not just in stone and mortar, but in prosperity. Their buildings attracted trade, tourism, well, as much as one could be a tourist in antiquity, and cultural exchange. They understood that a bustling marketplace beneath a grand archway was more than a commercial hub. It was a melting pot of ideas and influences, a precursor to the interconnected world we live in today. So, the next time you marvel at the soaring ceilings of a modern cathedral or the elegant curve of a shopping arcade, tip your hat to the Parthians. Their legacy is the architecture that surrounds us, a testament to human ingenuity and the eternal quest to build something that lasts longer than a fleeting empire. While the Parthian Empire may have crumbled, its architectural achievements continue to stand tall, whispering tales of innovation and aspiration to anyone willing to listen. In conclusion, as we wrap up our whirlwind tour of Parthian architecture, let's toast to the audacity of an empire that dared to dream big, build even bigger, and left a legacy that resonates through the ages. These weren't just buildings, they were statements, challenges to the world to dream as boldly as they did. And while the Parthians may not have had the last word in the annals of history, their architectural voice rings loud and clear, a melody of stone and vision that lingers on. So, as you step through the arches of your everyday life, remember that you're walking in the footsteps of giants. Giants who knew that true power lies not just in the empire you rule, but in the legacy you leave behind. You crack open your eyes to the golden glow of the Mediterranean sun, slipping through the wooden shutters of your modest dwelling in Tyre. It's the year 700 BCE, and as a Phoenician merchant, you're about to dive into a day fueled by the tantalizing aroma of opportunity. The city hums with the energy of trade, its veins pulsating with silk and spices, metals and murex-dyed fabrics. If capitalism had a cradle, it would be rocking here in Phoenicia, with Tyre as its boisterous heartbeat. You shuffle out of bed, pulling on a tunic that's seen more foreign lands than most of your city's soldiers. Your first stop, the bustling markets, an ancient precursor to Wall Street, minus the suits and skyscrapers. In Tyre, the market isn't just a place. It's a cacophony of languages, a tapestry of cultures woven tighter than your grandmother's best linen. You're not just buying and selling goods, you're trading stories, ideas, and sometimes, let's be real, a few exaggerated tales of your voyages. Phoenicia, often misunderstood as a string of sleepy coastal towns, is actually an economic powerhouse. Operating as a confederation of city-states, it stretches its influence far beyond the sandy beaches and into the farthest reaches of the known world. The Greeks might have called it the land of the purple, thanks to your exclusive trade in the rare and royal Tyrian purple dye harvested from murex snails. But to you, it's simply home, a vibrant hub where merchants like you play the role of modern-day rock stars. As you navigate the crowded stalls, you can't help but marvel at the diversity of goods available. There's tin from as far as Britain. Yes, your trade networks reach that far, and papyrus from Egypt, cedarwood from the towering forests of Lebanon, and the occasional elephant tusk from Africa. The sheer scale of it all could make your head spin faster than after a night of too much Phoenician wine. And let's not forget those glass beads, your people's pride and joy. crafted with a craftsmanship that would make any artisan weep with envy. In this bustling market, you're not just a cog in the machine, but a finely tuned gear in a well-oiled economic juggernaut. Merchants like you are the lifeblood of Phoenicia, driving trade and accumulating wealth that supports everything from the arts to the construction of mighty ships. Ships that, by the way, are the envy of every seafaring nation, crafted with cedar wood that's as durable as your grandmother's complaints about your life choices. The morning air is thick with the smell of spices, cinnamon, frankincense, and myrrh, worth more than their weight in gold. The aroma drifts through the market like an invisible thread, weaving together the stalls into a single, grand tapestry of commerce. Speaking of gold, you haggle with a fellow trader over a shipment of silver ingots, and the exchange is as much a dance as it is a negotiation. The art of the deal is alive and well, and you're its maestro, playing each note with precision. As you stroll through the marketplace, the myth of Phoenicia as a mere coastal culture is dispelled with every step. Your people are not just seafarers, they're architects of a vast trade network that stretches to the edges of the known world. Sure, it's tempting to romanticize the sea-sprayed voyages and the exotic lands, but the reality is a complex web of negotiations, alliances, and occasionally a bit of piracy. Yes, piracy. Who hasn't dabbled a little when the trade winds blow the wrong way? The ancient world might have lacked smartphones and social media, but Phoenician merchants like you didn't need them to spread your influence. Your ships were your status updates, your goods the hashtags that spread your reach. And unlike a modern influencer, your network wasn't just about followers. It was about tangible connections, forged in the heat of commerce and cooled by the salty sea breeze. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of it all, to imagine yourself as a daring adventurer charting new territories. But let's face it, your day-to-day life as a merchant is more about managing logistics than embarking on epic quests. You're not Indiana Jones. You're more like an ancient supply chain manager, minus the spreadsheets, but with a whole lot more personality. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, you're reminded of the sheer importance of your role. Without merchants like you, Phoenicia wouldn't be the thriving hub of trade it's famed to be. You're the economic glue that binds this civilization together, ensuring that the flow of goods, ideas, and cultures never ceases. So, as you move from stall to stall, remember, you're not just trading wares, you're shaping history one transaction at a time. And just like that, your morning as a Phoenician merchant is in full swing. You're not just a spectator in this grand market of life. You're a key player, a mover and shaker in the ancient world's most vibrant economy. So, keep your eyes sharp, your wits sharper, and don't forget to enjoy the ride. After all, in the ever-turning wheel of commerce, it's not just about where you're going, but how you get there. As midday approaches, the sun sits high in the sky, casting a relentless glow over the marketplace. It's time for you to dive headfirst into the real drama of the day, business negotiations. And in Phoenicia, haggling isn't just a skill. It's an art form that rivals any ancient masterpiece. You're about to engage in a verbal sparring match over commodities that are more valuable than a king's ransom. First up, the purple dye. Ah, Tyrian purple, the color of royalty and the envy of every ruler from Egypt to Babylon. Extracted from the murex snail, this dye is so rare that it takes around 250,000 snails to produce just 1 ounce of dye. Talk about labor-intensive. No wonder it costs an arm and a leg, or in ancient terms about 500 shekels per pound. That's enough to make even the wealthiest merchant do a double take. But for you, it's a golden ticket, a guaranteed way to line your pockets with silver while draping the elite in luxury. Next on the docket is cedar wood, the wood of kings. It's prized for its durability and pleasant scent, perfect for constructing temples, ships, and palaces. Today, a fellow trader is offering a shipment from the forests of Lebanon. Now, this isn't your regular IKEA flat-pack furniture. A single trunk can fetch around 120 shekels, and you're looking to offload an entire barge full. You know, just a casual 300 trees worth. The stakes are high, and so is the potential profit, but only if you can navigate the negotiations with the finesse of a Phoenician diplomat. As you engage in the dance of haggling, remember that this isn't just about numbers. It's about reading the room, or in this case, the marketplace. Is your trading partner sweating bullets? Are they shifting their feet? These micro-expressions can tip the scales in your favor. And let's not forget the charm. You're not just selling goods, You're selling yourself. A little flattery here, a joke there, and before you know it, you've convinced them that walking away from your deal would be a crime against commerce. But don't be fooled by the romantic notion of merchants as benevolent traders spreading goodwill and prosperity. The reality is far more cutthroat. In this world, loyalty is as fleeting as a desert mirage. One minute you're sharing a goblet of wine, the next you're undercutting each other faster than you can say, Merchants' Guild. It's a high-stakes game where fortunes are made and lost with the flick of a coin. You've heard tales of traders who have mysteriously vanished after a bad deal, whether due to a rival's machinations or a disgruntled partner seeking retribution. Who can say? But one thing is certain. In Phoenicia, trust is a currency more volatile than any silver or gold. As you navigate this labyrinth of deals, it's essential to remember the broader context. Your trading isn't just local, it's global. You're part of a network that spans from the sands of Egypt to the Isles of Britannia. The cedarwood you're negotiating today might become the ship's hull that carries tin from Cornwall or olive oil from Greece. This interconnected web of commerce is what makes Phoenicia the beating heart of the ancient economy. It's a high-wire act with no safety net, but the view from the top is nothing short of spectacular. Now, let's address the myth of the Phoenician merchant as a romantic adventurer. It's tempting to imagine yourself as a swashbuckler, charting unknown seas and discovering new lands. But the truth is far more mundane. Your world is one of ledgers and logistics, not treasure maps and hidden caves. You're managing supply chains and mitigating risks, all while keeping a sharp eye for the next big opportunity. The sea might be your highway, but the real journey is navigating the complexities of ancient commerce. In the midst of these negotiations, don't lose sight of the big picture. Every deal you close, every bargain you strike, contributes to the economic engine that powers Phoenicia. You're not just a merchant. You're a linchpin in a system that fuels empires and shapes the course of history. So, while the romance of the open sea and the allure of distant lands might beckon, remember that your true adventure is right here, in the heart of the marketplace. And as the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows over the bustling stalls, take a moment to savor the victories of the day. You've navigated the treacherous waters of ancient commerce, struck deals that will ripple across continents, and played your part in the grand tapestry of history. But don't rest on your laurels just yet. The wheel of trade never stops turning, and tomorrow brings new challenges, new negotiations, and new opportunities to seize. Keep your wits sharp and your tongue sharper, because in the world of Phoenician trade, the only constant is change. The sun casts an amber glow over the marketplace, and as the stalls start to pack in for the evening, it's time to shift your gaze from the buzzing market to the vast, endless sea. This isn't just any stretch of water. It's your lifeline, your road to riches, and sometimes your nemesis. Welcome to the afternoon of a Phoenician merchant's day, where the high seas are calling and the real adventure begins. Let's talk ships. Phoenician ships were the Formula One cars of the ancient world. Built with cedarwood so durable it could probably survive a modern-day shipping mishap, these vessels were the pride of your people. Imagine a sleek, streamlined hull designed to cut through waves like a hot knife through butter. Capable of holding up to 300 tons of cargo, these ships weren't just floating warehouses. They were symbols of power and prestige. Now, if you think navigating the Mediterranean was as simple as following the coastline, think again. Sure, you didn't have a GPS chirping directions, but you had something even better, the stars. That's right, the Phoenicians were the original celestial navigators. You'd set sail at dusk, guided by the North Star, a beacon of hope in the otherwise dark expanse of sky. The journey wasn't just about reaching the destination. It was about mastering the art of reading the sky and sea, a skill that separated the seafaring legends from the landlubbers. But let's be real about the logistics. Ancient navigation was less about romance and more about gut-wrenching anxiety. Every trip was a gamble, with storms lurking like angry creditors ready to collect. The famous trade routes, like the one stretching from Tyre to Carthage, weren't just lines on a map. They were fraught with danger, from unpredictable weather to hostile encounters. Forget rosy tales of glorious expeditions. Think more along the lines of, will we make it there in one piece? And speaking of getting along, let's dive into the political maze that was the Phoenician trading world. Your success wasn't just about having top-notch ships or savvy navigation skills. It was about who you knew, and more importantly, who you didn't tick off. The Phoenicians were the original diplomats, forging alliances with heavyweights like Egypt and Assyria. You had to be as smooth as a Mediterranean breeze when dealing with these empires. It wasn't just about trading goods. It was about knowing whose palm to grease and when. Take Egypt, for instance. Partnering with the pharaohs wasn't just about acquiring papyrus. It was about ensuring safe passage through their waters. In return, you'd supply them with cedar wood, perfect for building those grand tombs they were so fond of. It was a give-and-take relationship that required a deft diplomatic touch. One wrong move, and suddenly you'd find yourself on the wrong side of a very pointy spear. And then there's Assyria. These guys were the ancient world's equivalent of the neighborhood bully, but one you'd rather have on your side. Trading with Assyria meant access to their vast network of roads and trade routes. But this alliance came with strings, a lot of them. You'd have to navigate complex treaties and political quagmires that would give the modern UN a run for its money. It was less about sharing and more about survival. Yet, despite the headaches, these alliances were the lifeblood of your trade empire. They allowed Phoenician merchants like you to expand your reach far beyond the Mediterranean, tapping into markets that others could only dream of. The irony, while you were busy forging these alliances, you were also playing your cards close to the chest, ensuring that no one power held all the strings. Talk about walking a tightrope. Of course, all this political maneuvering wasn't without its fair share of bureaucratic nightmares. You think modern red tape is bad? Try navigating ancient customs and tariffs. Every port had its own set of rules, and heaven forbid you should cross a border without the proper documents, or worse, without the right bribe. It was a game of chess, with each move requiring careful calculation and a healthy dose of luck. And let's not forget the human element. Behind every ship, every alliance, every trade deal were individuals like you, working tirelessly to keep the wheels of commerce turning. Your crew wasn't just a bunch of sailors. They were your family, your partners in crime, and sometimes your biggest headache. Managing them was an art form in itself, requiring a delicate balance of authority and camaraderie. As the afternoon fades into evening, you reflect on the vast network that you're a part of, a network that stretches from the sun-drenched shores of your homeland to the icy reaches of Britannia. It's a network built on the backs of countless merchants, sailors, and diplomats, each playing their part in a grand tapestry of trade and commerce. And while the romantic allure of the open sea and distant lands might call to you, you know the truth. Your real adventure lies in the here and now, in the relentless pursuit of opportunity and the complex dance of diplomacy. So, as the stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky, you prepare for another day in the life of a Phoenician merchant, a day filled with challenges, opportunities, and the ever-present promise of adventure. So keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind on the prize, because in the world of Phoenician trade, the future is as boundless as the sea itself. As twilight descends over Tyre, the marketplace slowly gives way to the softer rhythms of evening life. Your day as a Phoenician merchant isn't done yet, though. Now it's time to transition from the chaos of commerce to the vibrant tapestry of social and cultural life that defines your world. Let's start with family roles. Unlike the solitary figure of a merchant that romantic tales often paint, you're anything but a lone ranger. Your family is your anchor, your support system, and occasionally your board of directors. In Phoenician society, family isn't just a personal affair. It's an economic engine. Your spouse might be managing the household accounts while your eldest son is learning the ropes of trade, shadowing you like an ancient intern. Forget the notion of the distant, absent merchant. You're more like the CEO of a small family-run corporation. And what about leisure? Well, let's just say Phoenicians knew how to unwind. You might find yourself at a symposium, the ancient equivalent of a networking event mixed with a frat party. These gatherings were as much about socializing as they were about sealing deals. Picture this. Reclining on cushion couches, you and your peers sip wine as discussions flow as freely as the libations. Topics range from the latest trade routes to philosophical debates, with the occasional side of gossip thrown in for good measure. But let's not overlook the cultural exchanges that define your evenings. Phoenicia is a vibrant melting pot, and your society is a tapestry of influences from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Archaeological finds tell the story. Egyptian amulets alongside Mesopotamian cylinder seals, Greek pottery mingling with local craftsmanship. It's like the ancient world's version of the United Nations, but with better food and fewer resolutions. Take the influence of the Greeks, for instance. While they were busy perfecting democracy and philosophy, you were importing their pottery and sometimes their gods. Yes, the Phoenician pantheon was a bit of a cultural buffet. You'd find Baal sharing space with Astarte, and maybe even a borrowed Greek deity or two. This cultural exchange wasn't just about artifacts or deities. It was a two-way street where ideas and innovations flowed back and forth like the tides. And speaking of tides, let's address the idea of the solitary merchant, isolated and aloof. The truth is, your life is woven into the community fabric. You're not just trading goods, you're trading stories, building relationships, and creating a network that extends far beyond the borders of your city. Your role as a merchant means you're as much a diplomat as you are a businessman. Every evening stroll through Tyre is a testament to this interconnectedness. You might pass a neighbor who just returned from a fruitful trip to Egypt, carrying tales of the pharaoh's latest architectural marvel. Or perhaps you'll bump into an artisan showcasing their latest creation, inspired by both local and foreign motifs. Even your home reflects this cultural melange. The mosaic floor might depict scenes from Homer's epics, while your walls are adorned with Egyptian-style frescoes. It's a vibrant blend that speaks to the diverse influences that have shaped Phoenician society. But let's not get too romantic about it. The reality is that this cultural exchange isn't always harmonious. Sometimes it's a clash of traditions and beliefs, a negotiation of identity in a world that's constantly shifting. Yet, it's this very tension that makes Phoenician society so dynamic, so resilient. As you settle in for dinner with your family, you're reminded of the role you play in this complex web. Your table is laden with dishes that tell a story of trade and cultural exchange. There's fish caught in the Mediterranean, seasoned with spices from far-off lands, bread baked from grain traded with the Egyptians, and wine from grapes that owe their lineage to Greek vines. Each bite is a reminder of the interconnectedness that defines your world. And let's not forget the entertainment. Music and dance are integral to Phoenician life. You might be serenaded by a lyre player as your evening unfolds, the music a blend of local and foreign influences that echo the diversity of your society. Yet, beneath this cultural richness lies the harsh reality of maintaining such a diverse society. It requires diplomacy, tact, and sometimes a willingness to compromise. As a merchant, you're no stranger to these challenges. Each trade deal, each negotiation is a microcosm of the broader social dynamics at play. The evening draws to a close, but the pulse of the city beats on. As you prepare to retire, you reflect on the day's accomplishments and the challenges yet to come. Your role as a merchant isn't just about profit. It's about bridging worlds, navigating the intricate dance of commerce and culture. And while the romantic allure of the solitary merchant might persist in stories, the truth is far richer, far more complex. You're part of a community, a society that thrives on the interplay of cultures and ideas. It's a world where the past and present collide, where the ancient and modern coexist in a delicate balance. So, as you close your eyes, you carry with you the knowledge that tomorrow brings new opportunities, new challenges, and new stories to tell. In the world of Phoenician trade, the journey never truly ends. It merely evolves, like the ever-changing tides of the Mediterranean. As the Mediterranean waves lull you into a well-earned slumber, let's hit pause and marvel at the wild ride that is your life as a Phoenician merchant. It's been a day of wheeling and dealing, navigating not just the seas, but the intricate web of ancient commerce that your people spun across continents. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about you. Your daily grind is part of a much grander narrative, one that echoes through the halls of history long after the last murex snail was squeezed for dye. Phoenicia, often relegated to the dusty footnotes of history, played puppet master in a drama that shaped the ancient world. While empires rose and fell, your trade networks quietly stitched together a tapestry of cultures and innovations. Let's talk about the alphabet, for instance. That seemingly mundane collection of letters we take for granted today. It's a gift from the Phoenicians to the world. Born out of the need for efficient record-keeping in trade, this alphabet was a game-changer. By around 1050 BCE, you guys had streamlined the cumbersome cuneiform and hieroglyphs into a sleek, 22-character set that was as easy to use as a modern keyboard. Your alphabet took to the ancient world like a particularly catchy meme, spreading as far as Greece and Rome. The Greeks, bless their philosophical hearts, adapted it for their own use, giving rise to the alphabets that would eventually evolve into the Latin script we're using right now. Talk about a legacy, but let's not romanticize it too much. Sure, the alphabet was revolutionary, but it was born out of necessity, not altruism. You needed a way to keep track of trade goods, debts, and those pesky IOUs. It was less about enlightenment and more about ensuring you got your fair share of shekels. Yet this practical invention had an unintended consequence. It democratized knowledge. Suddenly, literacy wasn't just for the elite scribes. It was accessible to anyone with a need to jot down a ledger or pen a love letter. You can thank the Phoenicians next time you scrawl a grocery list or send a text. Now, let's shift gears to the broader economic impact of Phoenician trade. Your bustling markets weren't just about exchanging goods. They were about exchanging cultures, ideas, and technologies. By the time you finished haggling over the latest shipment of cedarwood or purple dye, you'd inadvertently fostered a multicultural dialogue that spanned continents. The tin you traded from the misty isles of Britain didn't just stay in Phoenicia. It was alloyed with copper to make bronze, fueling technological advancements and artistic endeavors across the ancient world. Your trade routes were the arteries through which the lifeblood of civilization flowed, connecting distant lands like never before. And let's not forget the role of the Phoenician cities themselves. Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, they were like the ancient world's Silicon Valley, hubs of innovation and economic powerhouses. These city-states were fiercely independent, yet united by a common language of trade and culture. They were the original global citizens, long before passports or frequent flyer miles were a thing. Sure, they didn't conquer massive swaths of land like the Assyrians or Persians, but they didn't need to. Their empire was built on commerce, not conquest, a network of influence rather than an expanse of territory. Of course, with great trade networks come great responsibilities and a fair share of treachery. Phoenician merchants had to be as shrewd as they were adventurous. Navigating the political landscape required a deft touch, as allegiances shifted faster than a Mediterranean breeze. You weren't just trading goods, you were trading in trust, a currency more volatile than any stock market. One wrong move, and your fortunes could sink faster than a storm-battered trireme. So why, you might ask, isn't Phoenicia as celebrated as Rome or Greece? Perhaps it's because your legacy is an invisible one, woven into the very fabric of modern civilization. You were the silent architects of globalization before it was cool, the unsung heroes of antiquity who proved that the pen, or in this case, the alphabet, truly is mightier than the sword. As the stars twinkle above, casting their ancient light on the Mediterranean's rippling surface, remember this. Your legacy as a Phoenician merchant is far from forgotten. It's there in every letter penned, every trade route charted, and every cultural exchange that spans the globe. The forgotten empire may not have left behind towering monuments or sprawling empires, but its impact resonates in the unlikeliest of places, from the alphabets we use to the trade practices that underpin our modern world. So the next time you find yourself lost in thought on a quiet night, watching the waves dance under the moonlit sky, take a moment to appreciate the role you've played in history's grand tapestry. You and your fellow merchants have left a lasting legacy, one as enduring as the stars themselves. In the world of Phoenician trade, the journey never truly ends. It merely evolves, echoing through the ages like the gentle lapping of the sea against the shores of time. If you ever wondered what it was like to be the rock star of ancient Rome, look no further than Emperor Trajan. He was the kind of guy who could make conquering massive swaths of land seem like just another Tuesday. Trajan wasn't born into the purple toga of emperorship, but worked his way up the ranks like the world's most ambitious gladiator, minus the whole fighting-to-the-death thing. Born in Italica, a Roman colony in what is now southern Spain, around 53 AD, he was one of those rare finds in Roman history, a provincial who made it to the big leagues in Rome. And he wasn't just any emperor. He was Optimus Princeps, or the best ruler. It's a bit like being voted the best band at Woodstock, but you know, with more swords and fewer flower crowns. Before he was sitting on the imperial throne, Trajan's life was more like an episode of Survivor, Roman edition. He cut his teeth in the Roman army, where he was known for getting his hands as dirty as his soldiers. He wasn't one of those leaders who shouted orders from a safe distance. Trajan was right there in the muck, earning the respect of his men the old-fashioned way, through sheer competence. By the time he was called to Rome, he had already impressed everyone with his military prowess, a trait that would serve him well when he eventually became emperor. Now, Roman politics was essentially a full-contact sport, sort of like rugby, but with more backstabbing, literally. Trajan's ascent to power in 98 AD wasn't a simple matter of waiting for his turn. Nah, he had to navigate a political landscape that was more treacherous than a Roman bathhouse floor. The reigning emperor, Nerva, who had taken over in what amounted to a hostile corporate takeover after Domitian's assassination, was about as popular as a toga malfunction at the Colosseum. Nerva needed someone who could stabilize the empire and impress the army, and Trajan fit the bill like a well-tailored tunic. So how exactly did Trajan manage to maintain such a positive image in a city where betrayal was as common as bread and circuses? Well, for starters, he had the uncanny ability to make people like him, a skill that would rival any modern-day politician's charm offensive. Trajan was a master of PR before PR even existed. He kept the Senate on his side by actually consulting them on decisions. Imagine that, an emperor who listened. And he didn't just listen to the Senate, he also paid attention to the needs of the Roman people. Trajan was all about those public works projects, roads, bridges, aqueducts. You name it, he built it. It was his way of saying, "Hey, Rome, I'm not just here to wear the laurel wreath and look pretty." Trajan's reputation as a benevolent ruler wasn't just smoke and mirrors, either. He was genuinely committed to the welfare of his people, which might sound like a low bar, but in Roman politics, it was practically revolutionary. He even established a welfare program for poor children called the Alimenta. And this wasn't just a flash in the pan. The program was so successful that it lasted well beyond his reign. It turns out that a little bread and kindness go a long way. But let's not get too misty-eyed. Trajan was still very much a product of his time. His military campaigns were as brutal as they were successful. He expanded the Roman Empire to its largest extent through a series of campaigns, most notably in Dacia, modern-day Romania. It was a campaign that filled Rome's coffers with so much gold that it caused inflation. Trajan's army overran Dacia in 2 campaigns, and in 106 AD, the Dacian king Decebalus was defeated, leading to the annexation of Dacia as a Roman province. It was a win that would make any emperor swell with pride, or at least build a colossal column to celebrate, a 100-foot-tall testament to his conquests that still stands in Rome today. It's like a giant Instagram post, carved in stone. In a city where the knife in your back was as common as the wine in your goblet, Trajan managed to keep his head on his shoulders by being both competent and charming, a rare combo in any era. His ability to strike a balance between military might and civic responsibility made him not just a great general, but a beloved leader. It's no wonder that when subsequent emperors took the throne, they were often wished to be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan. In the end, Trajan wasn't just Rome's greatest conqueror, he was its greatest optimist. And speaking of Trajan being Rome's greatest optimist, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of his most famous military campaigns, the Dacian Wars. Think of these not as mere battles, but as the ancient world's version of a blockbuster series, complete with sequels that outdid the original. The Dacian Wars were the Roman Empire's magnum opus of conquest, played out over 2 major campaigns from 101-102 AD and 105-106 AD. It's like Trajan decided that one victory lap just wasn't enough. This wasn't just about expanding territory, it was about making a statement. Dacia was the glittering prize in Trajan's imperial crown, a land rich in resources, especially that ever-coveted gold. You know, the kind of stuff that would make any emperor drool faster than you can say, inflation. Now, let's talk logistics. Trajan wasn't just marching a few hundred soldiers through the woods for a weekend skirmish. Nope, he had to mobilize tens of thousands of troops across the rugged terrain of Europe. Imagine moving an entire army without GPS, Google Maps, or even a halfway decent compass. It's like trying to organize a massive family road trip, but with more swords and fewer snacks. Trajan's army consisted of around 100,000 men, including legions, auxiliaries, and cavalry. That's practically an entire city on the move, requiring an enormous supply chain to keep everyone fed, equipped, and motivated. The Romans were masters of engineering, and they knew how to build roads, bridges, and fortifications faster than a modern-day construction crew could set up a traffic cone. Trajan's campaigns weren't just about marching and fighting. They were also about making other people jealous. The construction of Trajan's column in Rome was the ultimate ancient PR move. Standing at about 100 feet tall, this marble masterpiece is like the Instagram of antiquity, only instead of selfies, it's filled with scenes of Roman valor and Dacian defeat. It depicts, in painstaking detail, the Roman army crossing the Danube River on a bridge of boats, storming enemy fortresses, and generally being the badasses of the ancient world. And let's not forget the real kicker. At the top of the column originally stood a statue of Trajan himself, because why wouldn't you want to be the cherry on top of your victory Sunday? But here's where we peel back the marble facade and look at the less glamorous side of things. You see, those heroic depictions on Trajan's column conveniently leave out the less-than-noble aspects of war, like the human cost. The Dacian wars were brutal. We're talking about tens of thousands of Roman and Dacian lives lost, cities razed, and a trail of destruction that would make any fan of historical realism wince. It's easy to romanticize the past when all you see are the glorious victories carved in stone. But let's not forget the gritty, blood-soaked reality that those stones are built upon. Then there's the economic angle. Conquering Dacia wasn't just about ego or glory. It was also a financial windfall. The loot from Dacia's gold mines helped fill the Roman treasury to bursting, funding massive public works and welfare projects back in Rome. Trajan wasn't just a conqueror. He was a savvy ruler who knew how to turn military success into economic prosperity. But as with all things, there was a flip side. That flood of gold into the Roman economy also led to inflation, proving once again that too much of a good thing can be, well, too much. In the grand tapestry of history, Trajan's Dacian wars are a vivid thread, woven with both triumph and tragedy. They expanded the Roman Empire to its greatest territorial extent, but they also remind us that behind every grand conquest lies a complex web of human stories, of ambition, sacrifice, and the eternal quest for more. As we wrap up this chapter in Trajan's saga, keep in mind that we're only scratching the surface. There are more campaigns to conquer, more myths to debunk, and more stories to tell. Trajan's reign is far from over, and neither is our journey through his remarkable legacy. Now that we've carved through the blood-soaked tapestry of Trajan's military exploits, let's pivot to something decidedly less stabby, but just as monumental, his infrastructure projects. If the Dacian Wars were Trajan's blockbuster Conquest series, then his public works were the spin-off reality show, where ancient Rome got a makeover that would put HGTV to shame. First up, let's talk about the roads. Not just any roads, mind you. These were the superhighways of the ancient world. Under Trajan's rule, Roman roads stretched over 400,000 kilometers, crisscrossing the empire like a well-tuned GPS. You might think of these roads as the arteries that kept the Roman Empire alive, pumping soldiers, supplies, and information across vast distances with the efficiency of a high-speed internet connection. And what did it cost? Oh, just a few million denarii here and there. But when you've got Dacian gold pouring in faster than you can say, fiscal surplus, who's counting? Then there were the aqueducts, those engineering marvels that brought fresh water to Roman cities like a gift from the gods. Trajan expanded the aqueduct system, ensuring that Rome didn't just survive, but thrive. He knew that nothing says civilization quite like a reliable water supply. It's like the ancient equivalent of having a killer Wi-Fi connection, essential for keeping everyone happy and productive. And let's not forget the sheer ingenuity of these structures. They relied on gravity, precise gradients, and a whole lot of Roman elbow grease to transport water over vast distances without a single electric pump. Trajan's aqueducts weren't just about practicality. They were a statement of Roman superiority, a liquid testament to the empire's engineering prowess. But the piece de resistance of Trajan's public works had to be the Trajan's Forum. Imagine a sprawling complex of marble and grandeur, a downtown hub that made all other forums look like quaint country markets. Completed in around 113 AD, this architectural marvel was the ancient world's answer to a mega-mall, complete with shops, a basilica, libraries, and even a grand column at its center to remind everyone who they had to thank for this splendor. The Forum wasn't just a place to shop and socialize. It was an embodiment of Roman power and prosperity, a physical manifesto of Trajan's reign. Now, let's talk about the price tag. Construction of Trajan's Forum cost around 50 million denarii, a staggering sum that would have made even the most extravagant Roman aristocrat blush. But remember, Trajan had a secret weapon, the Dacian gold mines. The spoils from his conquests were funneled directly into such public works, a clever move that turned military success into civic glory. It's the kind of financial alchemy that modern politicians can only dream of. You see, Trajan wasn't just building monuments. He was investing in the empire's future, laying down the infrastructure that would support Roman society for generations. Of course, with any great undertaking, there's a shadow lurking behind the glint of marble and gold. The truth is, these magnificent works often came at a human cost. The labor force behind Trajan's grand projects included thousands of slaves and lower-class workers, toiling under the hot sun for the glory of Rome. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of ancient Rome's architectural achievements, but it's worth remembering that these wonders were built on the sweat and backs of those who had little say in the matter. From an economic standpoint, Trajan's infrastructure projects were a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they revitalized the Roman economy, creating jobs and boosting trade. On the other hand, the influx of Dacian gold did lead to inflation, a classic case of too much of a good thing. It's a bit like winning the lottery, and then realizing that all your newfound wealth is driving up the cost of everything around you. Trajan's Rome was a bustling metropolis, yes, but it was also a city grappling with the economic complexities of rapid expansion. And let's not overlook the political genius behind these endeavors. Trajan was acutely aware that public works were more than just bricks and mortar. They were tools of propaganda. Every road, every aqueduct, every grand building was a testament to his leadership and a way to keep the populace on his side. After all, nothing wins hearts and minds quite like a gleaming new forum or a freshly paved road. Trajan knew that while military victories might expand the empire, it was these tangible, everyday improvements that would cement his legacy in the hearts of the Roman people. In the end, Trajan's infrastructure projects were a masterclass in leadership, blending ambition with practicality and vision with execution. They were quite literally the foundations of his reign, setting the stage for Rome's continued dominance long after his time. As we bring this part of Trajan's tale to a close, remember that the story is far from over. There are more roads to lay, more myths to debunk, and more chapters in the saga of Rome's greatest optimist. So stay tuned, fellow history buffs, because the next leg of our journey promises to be just as thrilling as the last. As the dust settles on Trajan's monumental infrastructure projects and their dazzling impact, let's pivot to another of his key legacies, his administrative reforms. Because you see, there's more to running an empire than just building big things and winning battles. Trajan's rule offers a masterclass in the ancient art of governance, where spinning bad news was as much a survival skill as wielding a gladius. Trajan wasn't just a military rock star. He was also the Mick Jagger of Roman bureaucracy, energized, charismatic, surprisingly effective at managing the sprawling, multicultural beast that was the Roman Empire. Picture this, an empire stretching from the moody Scottish highlands to the sun-drenched sands of Egypt, with a population of roughly 60 million people. That's like trying to govern all of modern Italy, Spain, and France combined, without Google Translate or even a reliable postal service. Yikes. So, how did Trajan keep the imperial machine humming smoothly? For starters, he had a knack for picking the right people for the job, akin to being the best talent scout in the Roman world. He appointed competent, loyal governors who could handle the day-to-day grind of provincial management, a crucial move considering the empire was like a patchwork quilt of cultures, languages, and local customs. Trajan understood that ruling Rome was a team sport. You needed players who could pass the ball and score the points, not just sit on the bench and sulk. One of his key strategies was to divide large provinces into smaller, more manageable units. Take the province of Dacia, for instance. After his conquests, Trajan split it into smaller provinces to make governing easier. It's a bit like breaking down a massive to-do list into bite-sized tasks. except the tasks involve keeping rebellious tribes in check and ensuring tax revenue flows back to Rome. It's the kind of pragmatic thinking that makes Trajan less of a romanticized emperor and more of a shrewd CEO. But let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. Trajan had his fair share of administrative headaches, too. Rebellions in provinces like Judea and Britain were as predictable as a Roman senator attending a toga party. These uprisings were sparked by cultural tensions, heavy taxation, and a general distaste for Roman rule. Trajan's response was a mix of carrot and stick, offering concessions where possible, while also deploying the Roman legions to remind everyone who was boss. It's a classic case of speak softly and carry a big pilum. And here's where Trajan really showed his political chops. He knew how to spin a narrative. When things went south, his ability to turn setbacks into stories of resilience and triumph was unmatched. Imagine the Roman equivalent of a modern press conference, with Trajan calmly explaining how a minor rebellion was actually an opportunity for the empire to demonstrate its strength and unity. It's the kind of spin that would make any modern-day politician nod in approval. Of course, governing such a vast empire wasn't just about quelling rebellions and managing taxes. Trajan also implemented reforms aimed at improving the lives of ordinary Romans. He expanded the Alimenta, a welfare program that provided food and financial assistance to poor children throughout Italy. Sure, it was partially a PR move, but it was also a genuine attempt to address social inequality and curry favor with the populace. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a social safety net, albeit one funded by the spoils of war. But let's talk numbers, because nothing tells a story like cold, hard data. The Alimenta program cost roughly 5 million denarii per year, a hefty sum that was nonetheless dwarfed by the revenues flowing in from Dacia's gold mines. It's a classic tale of robbing Peter to pay Paul, or in this case, conquering Decebalus to feed the kids. Trajan understood that while military victories won him glory, it was these kinds of social programs that would win him enduring loyalty. Despite these successes, Trajan faced the perennial challenge of maintaining control over a diverse empire. In many ways, his administration was a balancing act between central authority and local autonomy. He granted certain provinces more self-governance, recognizing that heavy-handed rule only stoked the fires of rebellion. It was a delicate dance, and not always a graceful one. And let's not forget the Senate, that august body of Roman aristocrats who, at the best of times, were as reliable as a Roman chariot on a rainy day. Trajan cultivated a strong relationship with the Senate, consulting them on important decisions and reinforcing their role in governance. It was a savvy move that kept Rome's political elite on side, even if it meant occasionally massaging their egos with a well-timed compliment or a strategic bit of flattery. Yet, for all his administrative brilliance, Trajan was still very much a product of his time. His reign was marked by a relentless drive for expansion and a belief in Rome's manifest destiny to rule the world. It was this ambition that ultimately stretched the empire's resources thin and set the stage for future challenges. As the Roman historian Cassius Dio noted, Trajan did not neglect the army, nor did he allow the provinces to be oppressed, a testament to his balanced approach to governance. In the end, Trajan's administrative reforms were a testament to his adaptability and foresight. They reveal a ruler who was not only adept at wielding power, but also skilled at managing the complex realities of empire. His reign offers a window into the challenges of leadership in a world without modern conveniences, where a well-timed decree or a strategic alliance could mean the difference between order and chaos. As we prepare to dive into the final chapter of Trajan's story, remember that the emperor's legacy is as multifaceted as the empire he ruled. From military might to administrative acumen, Trajan's reign encapsulates the heights of Roman ambition and the complexities of imperial governance. So, buckle up, fellow history buffs, because the journey through Trajan's world is far from over, and the next leg promises to be just as enlightening as the last. Now, as we transition from Trajan's administrative prowess to the twilight of his reign, let's confront the inevitable. Even Rome's golden boy had to face the final curtain. In 117 AD, Trajan's health began to falter. After years of conquering lands and hearts alike, His body finally demanded a timeout. He died in the sweltering heat of Cilicia, modern-day Turkey, far from the grandeur of Rome. It was a final departure that lacked the pomp of his life, perhaps fitting for a man who'd spent his days on the front lines rather than lounging in the lap of luxury. With Trajan's passing, the empire was at a crossroads. Enter Hadrian, Trajan's second cousin and adopted heir, who took the reins with a style that could be described as cautious, perhaps even a bit of a buzzkill by Roman standards. If Trajan was the empire's rock star, Hadrian was the contemplative poet, more interested in shoring up defenses than painting the map Roman red. His reign marked a shift from expansion to consolidation, a move that would stabilize the empire, but also spark endless debates about what might have been had Trajan's conquests continued. Now, let's take a moment to talk about Hadrian's game plan. He understood that the empire was like a great Roman feast, delicious, but prone to indigestion if you overindulge. So, instead of gobbling up more territories, Hadrian focused on what he already had. He pulled back from some of Trajan's overextended borders, particularly in Mesopotamia, deciding that a well-fortified frontier was sexier than a bloated empire. This wasn't just about strategy, it was about survival. The Roman Empire was big enough to be its own continent, and managing it was like trying to balance a wobbly tower of amphorae. Hadrian's approach was a practical response to the logistical nightmare Trajan left behind, but it also spoke to a larger truth about leadership. Sometimes, the best way to win is to start playing. This was a stark contrast to the expansionist fever that had gripped Rome for generations. But despite his pragmatic approach, Hadrian never quite captured the public's imagination the way Trajan did. History, it seems, prefers its heroes to have a bit more swagger and a lot less restraint. As we zoom out to see the bigger picture, Trajan's reign becomes a pivotal chapter in the story of the 5 good emperors, a term coined by the historian Edward Gibbon. This group of emperors, which included Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, marked a period of relative peace and prosperity in the Roman Empire, known as the Pax Romana. It was a time when the empire was the envy of the world, a shimmering beacon of civilization and culture, or so the story goes. But let's not get carried away by the romance of it all. The notion of the 5 good emperors is a bit like calling a restaurant the top 5 of all time, because they never poisoned anyone. Sure, it was a stable period compared to the chaos that often reigned in Rome, but the real story is a little more nuanced. Trajan's reign, for all its triumphs, was also marked by the harsh realities of war, economic strain, and the ever-present threat of rebellion. Yet, it's easy to see why Trajan's legacy is so often bathed in a golden glow. He was the emperor who expanded the empire to its greatest extent, the conqueror who brought untold riches to Rome, and the ruler who genuinely seemed to care about his people. His PR game was strong, and the monuments he left behind, like Trajan's column, are timeless reminders of his achievements. It's the kind of legacy that would make any modern-day politician green with envy. But let's remember that legacy, much like history, is all about perspective. Trajan's story is one of ambition and achievement, but also of the costs that come with empire building. The grand narratives we cherish often gloss over the gritty details, preferring the sheen of marble and the tales of glory. Yet, as any good historian will tell you, it's in the muck and mire of those details that we find the truest stories of human endeavor. And what of Trajan's impact on the Roman Empire's long-term trajectory? His reign set the stage for a period of stability that would last for decades, a testament to his administrative and military acumen. But it also left the empire grappling with the challenges of managing an expansive territory. The inflation sparked by Dacia's gold was a harbinger of economic troubles that would plague Rome in the centuries to come. It's a classic case of biting off more than you can chew, with the indigestion to prove it. So, why do we remember Trajan with such fondness, even when the historical record tells a more complicated story? Perhaps it's because he embodies the duality of human nature, the relentless drive for greatness tempered by a genuine concern for the common good. In Trajan, we see both the conqueror and the caretaker, a ruler who managed to be both feared and beloved. It's a balancing act that few can pull off, and it's why his name still echoes through the annals of history. As we wrap up our journey through Trajan's reign, let's take a moment to reflect on the nature of legacy itself. History is a living, breathing tapestry, woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, myth and reality. Trajan's story reminds us that the past is never as simple as it seems, that every grand narrative is built on the backs of countless untold stories. So, next time you find yourself marveling at the glory of ancient Rome, remember to look beyond the marble and the myths to find the deeper truths that lie beneath. Because in history, as in life, it's the shadows that often tell the most compelling tales. With that, our exploration of Trajan's world comes to a close. But don't worry, history buffs. The past is a vast landscape with endless stories waiting to be uncovered. So keep your curiosity alive, your questions sharp, and your sense of wonder intact. There's always another chapter to explore, another myth to debunk, and another journey to embark upon. Until next time, may your historical adventures be as thrilling as Trajan's own. Rome might have been built in a day if only they had access to modern time-lapse photography. But when it came to watering the city, the Romans took their sweet time, and for good reason. Before we get to the grand arches and flowing waters, let's talk about how it all started with the humble beginnings of Roman aqueducts. These early engineering marvels were born out of necessity, like most great innovations. Picture Rome around the 6th century BCE, a bustling village with more ambition than hygiene. The Tiber River was nice to look at, but it wasn't exactly the Evian of its day. Enter the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's original plumbing project, and perhaps the most glorified sewer in history. This wasn't just any ditch. It was a pioneering move that laid the groundwork for the aqueducts. What started as a simple canal to drain the marshlands and keep the stench at bay turned into a symbol of Roman ingenuity. You could call it the Big Bang of urban sanitation. Built around 600 BCE, the Cloaca Maxima was a stone-lined channel that snaked through the city, eventually emptying into the Tiber. It was Rome's first attempt to control water, and boy, did it take off. Now, if you think managing Rome's water supply was all about civic duty and public health, think again. The Romans were as much about politics as they were about plumbing. Roman leaders quickly realized that controlling water meant controlling the masses. What better way to win hearts and votes than to promise clean water? You could say they were the original spin doctors, only with more togas and fewer press releases. And it wasn't just about keeping things sanitary. Water was the lifeblood of Rome, fueling everything from the public baths to the notorious Roman feasts. Imagine trying to keep a city entertained without the ability to fill its lavish baths or water its gardens. Water was power, and the Romans wanted it in spades, so they set their sights on building a network that would channel the freshest mountain springs into the heart of the city. The first real aqueduct, the Aqua Appia, was commissioned in 312 BCE. This was no mere trickle. It was a 4-kilometer-long underground marvel that could transport about 73,000 cubic meters of water every day. Not bad for a civilization that thought lead pipes were a good idea. The Aqua Appia was a game-changer, setting the stage for the aqueduct boom that followed. These systems soon became the veins and arteries of the city, ensuring that water flowed as freely as political promises. The Romans faced plenty of challenges in their quest for hydration. For starters, they had to deal with the pesky laws of gravity. Water has this annoying habit of flowing downhill, and Rome was famously built on 7 hills. So, Roman engineers got creative. They used a series of arches, tunnels, and siphons to keep the water moving from the highlands to the city. It was like a game of chutes and ladders, only with a lot more marble and manpower. And let's not forget the financial side of things. Building these aqueducts wasn't cheap. The Aqua Claudia, one of the largest, cost about 350 million sesterces, roughly equivalent to a few billion modern dollars, give or take a few zeros. But to the Romans, it was worth every coin. Clean water wasn't just a necessity, it was a status symbol. The sheer scale of these projects was a testament to Roman ambition and engineering prowess. Of course, with all this talk of engineering feats and political maneuvering, the romanticized version of Rome's waterworks might make you think it was all fountains and wine baths. But let's not get carried away. The reality was a bit grittier. Maintenance was a constant headache. Aqueducts needed regular cleaning because, spoiler alert, nature doesn't care for your architectural masterpieces. Lime deposits would build up, and let's just say Roman water wasn't winning any purity contests. So, While the legends of Rome's aqueducts glisten with the sheen of marble and grandeur, the truth is that they were a mix of brilliance and pragmatism. These waterworks were as much about keeping the city running as they were about keeping up appearances. Rome's aqueducts were a pivotal chapter in engineering history, driven by necessity and sculpted by ambition. They laid the foundation for a network that would become the envy of the ancient world, all while Rome's leaders raised a glass, or a goblet, to their own ingenuity. And speaking of raising goblets, have you ever wondered just how those Romans managed to pull off their hydraulic magic tricks? Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Roman aqueduct construction, where the real engineering wizards turned water into urban lifeblood. Picture this. You're an ancient Roman engineer standing atop a hill, staring down at the sprawling city below. You need to get water from point A to point B. The only problem, point A is on top of a mountain, and point B is Rome, not exactly a downhill stroll. Enter the engineering marvels of arches, siphons, and tunnels, Roman engineers' secret weapons against the tyranny of gravity. The Romans were like the Newtons of their day, except their apple was a giant rock. They figured out that arches could carry loads more efficiently, allowing aqueducts to span valleys and navigate uneven terrain without collapsing like a house of cards. The Pont du Gard in southern France is a testament to this genius, a triple-tiered limestone masterpiece stretching over 50 kilometers. It's like the world's fanciest game of Jenga, just with bigger stakes. Now, here's the kicker. The Romans didn't just rely on arches. When the terrain got tricky, they turned to the power of the inverted siphon. Picture a giant U-bend. Water flows down one side, through a valley, and back up the other. The Romans were essentially defying physics, channeling water across dips in the landscape, as if they'd struck a deal with the gods themselves. They used lead pipes for these siphons, which might not win any modern plumbing awards, but hey, it got the job done. Sure, lead isn't exactly great for your health, but between that and the wine, let's just say it balanced out for the Romans. Of course, all this engineering wizardry needed a lot more than just clever designs. This is where the unsung heroes come in, the Roman laborers who turned blueprints into reality with sweat and sheer muscle. It's estimated that tens of thousands of laborers toiled away, many of them slaves or low-paid workers. And while their names have faded into oblivion, their work has endured for centuries. Imagine the scene. A sun-baked construction site buzzing with activity, stone cutters chiseling away like they were auditioning for history's loudest orchestra, while overseers shouted orders over the din. It was like the ultimate team-building exercise, only with more dust and less motivational speeches. But let's not sugarcoat it. Building aqueducts was grueling work. Workers had to quarry massive stones, transport them across miles, and then stack them with precision. It was like playing Tetris on expert mode, but with the added challenge of gravity and no undo button. The Romans had a knack for making the impossible seem inevitable, and nowhere was that clearer than in their aqueducts. And while we're unearthing truths, let's talk about the economics of it all. Constructing these water highways wasn't just a matter of civic pride. It was a colossal financial undertaking. The Aqua Marcia, one of Rome's longest aqueducts, cost around 180 million sesterces. To put that in context, that's like the GDP of a small nation, all for the sake of keeping the Roman baths filled and the fountains flowing. It's the ancient equivalent of an infrastructure bill, but with a lot more marble and fewer committee meetings. You might be thinking, was all this really necessary? Well, if you were a Roman citizen with a penchant for daily baths and garden parties, the answer was a resounding yes. Water wasn't just a utility. It was a symbol of civilization, a testament to Rome's greatness. Aqueducts allowed the city to grow, supporting a population of over 1 million people at its height. They were the arteries that carried life to every corner of the city, making possible the luxurious lifestyle that's become synonymous with ancient Rome. Now, let's debunk a myth or two. Some might imagine these aqueducts as pristine rivers of crystal-clear water, flowing straight from the gods. The reality, not quite. While the water was cleaner than your average river, it wasn't exactly Perrier. Lime deposits and algae were constant companions, and maintenance was a never-ending saga. Roman water inspectors, known as curators aquarum, had the unenviable job of keeping these systems running smoothly. It was less about heroics and more about practicality. Rome's aqueducts were as much about function as they were about form. The economic impact of these aqueducts was massive. By providing a reliable water supply, they allowed Rome to focus on other pursuits: commerce, agriculture, and of course, those legendary public baths. The baths were more than just places to get clean. They were the social hubs of Roman life. Imagine a modern-day spa mixed with a gym and a marketplace, and you're halfway there. The aqueducts made it all possible, and in doing so, they reshaped Roman society. So, while the legends of Rome's aqueducts might sparkle with tales of engineering genius and marble grandeur, the truth is far more grounded. These structures were a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance, built by hands that history forgot, but whose impact is still felt today. As we continue to unravel the story of Rome's aqueducts, remember that behind every great feat of engineering lies a tale of vision, toil, and not a small amount of audacity. So, as we wade further into the aqueduct saga, let's take a closer look at the Aqua Appia and the Aqua Claudia, two of Rome's most celebrated waterworks. These weren't just your run-of-the-mill plumbing projects. They were the superstars of the Roman hydraulic universe, each with its own tale of triumph and political drama. The Aqua Appia, the granddaddy of them all, was the first Roman aqueduct, commissioned by Appius Claudius Caecus in 312 BCE. At 4 kilometers long, it was a subterranean wonder, channeling water from springs near the river Anio. Now, you might think an underground aqueduct is about as exciting as a basement tour, but here's where it gets juicy. This wasn't just about providing water, it was a power play. Appius Claudius, being the savvy politician he was, knew that whoever controlled the water controlled the city. It was the ancient equivalent of holding the Wi-Fi password at a tech conference. Everybody needs it, and you become the hero of the hour. The construction of the Aqua Appia was a feat of engineering and human endurance. Its builders had to carve through rock and lay stones with precision, all while keeping everything under wraps, literally. The aqueduct ran mostly underground to protect it from enemies and the elements. But don't let the modesty fool you. This was Roman engineering flexing its muscles. And speaking of muscles, the men who toiled on these projects were likely the unsung bodybuilders of their day, lifting stones like they were auditioning for an ancient strongman competition. Fast forward to the Aqua Claudia, which was completed in 52 CE after a few stop-and-start attempts. This was a different beast altogether, a towering structure that stood as a testament to Roman ambition, and let's face it, a bit of their show-off nature. Stretching over 69 kilometers, it delivered water from the distant springs in the Anio Valley right into the bustling heart of Rome. If the Aqua Appia was the stealthy ninja of aqueducts, the Aqua Claudia was the peacock, strutting its stuff across the Roman skyline. The Aqua Claudia's construction was no walk in the park. It took over a decade to complete, thanks to interruptions from political scandals and financial woes. Sound familiar? Turns out the ancient Romans had their own version of budget overruns and bureaucratic red tape. But once it was up and running, it was a sight to behold. Imagine a series of stone arches marching across the landscape like a Roman legion on parade, each block meticulously placed to create a seamless flow of water. Of course, keeping these aqueducts running was akin to maintaining a fleet of vintage cars. They required constant upkeep and a legion of workers to ensure everything stayed in tip-top condition. Enter the Curator's Aquarum, the unsung heroes who managed the daily operations and maintenance of these waterworks. Their job was part engineer, part detective, tracking down leaks, clearing blockages, and ensuring the precious water reached its destination without turning into a Roman version of the leaky faucet. But here's where the plot thickens. Not all Romans enjoyed equal access to this liquid luxury. The politics of water distribution in Rome was as complex as a Shakespearean drama. Imagine the scene. Wealthy patricians lounging in their villas with private conduits delivering water straight to their baths, while the plebeians queued up at public fountains, hoping for a trickle. Water was a status symbol, and who got it first was often a matter of who you knew or who you could bribe. The poet Juvenal once quipped that in Rome, the first to receive water are those who pay for it. Some things, it seems, never change. The Roman elite wielded their water access like a badge of honor. Lavish fountains and garden pools became must-have accessories for the rich and powerful, turning water into a social currency. This wasn't just about staying hydrated. It was about making a splash in society, literally. Public baths, too, became arenas of social competition, where the who's who of Rome gathered to see and be seen, all while enjoying the fruits of the aqueduct's labor. So, while the Aqua Appia and Aqua Claudia stand as monuments to Roman engineering genius, they also tell a story of social inequality and political maneuvering. The aqueduct's waters may have flowed freely, but access was anything but equal. The reality was a complex dance of power, privilege, and politics, a theme as enduring as the aqueducts themselves. And let's not forget the economic impact of these waterworks. The aqueducts were more than just infrastructure. They were catalysts for urban growth and prosperity. By providing a reliable water supply, they enabled Rome to expand and flourish, facilitating everything from agriculture to industry. They were the lifeblood of the city, feeding its ambition and sustaining its dreams. As we continue our journey through the winding history of Roman aqueducts, remember that beneath the stone arches and flowing waters lies a story of human ingenuity and ambition, a tale as timeless as the city itself. And if you thought the tale of the Aqua Appia and Aqua Claudia was riveting, just wait until we dive into the next chapter of Roman waterworks, where the stakes get even higher and the drama flows as freely as the water itself. Stay tuned for more intrigue, innovation, and of course, a few more Roman scandals. So, if you thought an aqueduct was just a glorified hosepipe, let's dive deeper into the watery whispers of ancient Rome. Were these stone serpents really the eighth wonder of the world, or merely a clever PR campaign by the Romans to flex their engineering muscles? Spoiler alert. It's a bit of both, with a dollop of marble-clad bravado. On the surface, the aqueducts seem like monumental feats of engineering, and they were. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find that they also served as the ultimate Roman flex. The aqueducts weren't just about keeping the fountains gushing and the public baths steaming. They were Rome's way of saying, look what we can do. It's like when your neighbor installs a massive fountain in their front yard. Sure, it's nice to look at, but it's also a not-so-subtle nudge that they've got their act together. Roman leaders, ever the savvy spin doctors, used these aqueducts as tools of propaganda, showcasing the empire's prowess to both friends and foes. They were the Instagram influencers of their day, curating a perfect feed of arches and water channels to project power and sophistication. But let's not get too carried away with this romanticized image. The truth is, these aqueducts, while undeniably impressive, were not the pristine paradises some might imagine. First, let's debunk a persistent myth that Roman aqueducts delivered crystal-clear water. In reality, the water was more akin to a medieval potion, a mix of H2O, lime deposits, and a healthy dose of algae. Maintenance crews, known as curators aquarum, were constantly battling the elements to keep things flowing smoothly. Their job was less about architectural awe and more about rolling up their sleeves to unclog the ancient equivalent of a backed-up sink. And speaking of maintenance, the romantic notion of aqueducts flowing endlessly like a scenic river is a bit of a mirage. In truth, these systems required constant attention and resources. It was high-maintenance infrastructure, not unlike owning a classic car that spends more time in the shop than on the road. Just ask the Emperor Augustus, who set up a special fund to pay for maintenance after realizing that letting these structures crumble was not a good look for the empire. Now, let's talk about the impact of these aqueducts on Roman society. Yes, they transformed urban life, enabling a population explosion and economic boom. With water readily available, public baths became the social hubs, where citizens could unwind, gossip, and plot their next power move. It was like a spa day meets a business meeting, with a side of political intrigue. But here's the kicker. Not everyone got to enjoy that luxurious soak. Access to water was a privilege and a political tool. The aqueducts were a lifeline for public amenities, but they also fueled private indulgences. Wealthy Romans installed elaborate fountains and private baths in their villas, turning water into a status symbol. The poet Martial quipped that while the poor queued at public fountains, the affluent bathed in private pools. It was a tale of two cities, with water as the dividing line. Of course, the aqueducts did more than just quench the thirst of Rome's elite. They were the backbone of the city's agricultural prowess, supporting the crops that fed a growing population. They made it possible to irrigate farms and gardens, ensuring that Rome could sustain its insatiable appetite. But let's not forget the economic undercurrents at play. Building and maintaining these aqueducts was a massive financial endeavor, often funded by taxes or the spoils of war. It was a balancing act of public investment and political gain, with water as the currency of power. Now, here's a fun fact. The Romans had a penchant for naming their aqueducts after the politicians who funded them. It was the ancient equivalent of naming rights, only instead of a sports stadium. You got a massive waterway. Imagine sipping from the Aqua Pier and knowing that your hydration came courtesy of a politician's vanity project. But hey, if it kept the water flowing, who's complaining? In the grand scheme of things, the Roman aqueducts were both a marvel and a mirage. They symbolized the heights of human ingenuity, but also the depths of inequality. They were a testament to Rome's ambition, but also a reminder of its limitations. As we continue our journey through this labyrinth of arches and ambition, remember that every drop of water carries a story, a tale of power, privilege, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. So, as we pause at this juncture, keep your toga on, because the saga of Rome's aqueducts is far from over. Next, we'll wade into the murkier waters of Roman politics and engineering, where the stakes rise higher than aqueducts' arches. Prepare for more intrigue, innovation, and a splash of scandal. After all, if there's one thing the Romans loved more than a good bath, it was a juicy story. Stay tuned. As we dive into the final act of our aqueduct adventure, let's turn our gaze to the legacy of these ancient marvels. The Romans may have left the building, quite literally, but they're aqueducts. They're the original party crashers. Long after the empire packed up its legions and faded into the annals of history, these stone sentinels remained, standing as silent witnesses to a bygone era. Picture them as the original Instagram influencers, still racking up like centuries later. First, a little reality check. The Roman Empire might have crumbled in 476 CE, but its aqueducts outlived it by a country mile. Take the Aqua Virgo, still supplying Rome's Trevi fountain with its iconic gush. That's right, toss your coins with respect. It's over 2,000 years of history you're making wishes on. Turns out, these aqueducts were built to last, a bit like a Roman version of IKEA furniture, only without the confusing instructions and leftover screws. Now, let's talk numbers. At the peak of their glory, Rome's aqueducts spanned a whopping 500 kilometers, channeling around 1 million cubic meters of water into the city daily. That's like filling 400 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single day, without the need for synchronized swimmers. Their influence wasn't just about keeping ancient Rome hydrated. It was about setting the stage for modern engineering. The Romans didn't just build aqueducts. They laid the groundwork for the very idea of urban planning. Fast forward to today, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a major city that hasn't borrowed a page from the Roman playbook. From the gravity-fed water systems of New York City to the sprawling aqueduct networks of Los Angeles, the echoes of Roman engineering resonate through modern infrastructure. It's as if every time we turn on a tap, we're nodding to ancient Rome with a grazy amici. But here's the kicker. Despite their genius, the Romans also left us a cautionary tale. Their waterworks might have been marvels of engineering, but they were also fraught with challenges that mirror our own infrastructure woes today. Take maintenance, for example, a persistent Roman headache and a 21st century migraine. Back then, the curators aquarum were the unsung heroes, battling leaks and blockages with the determination of a plumber on a mission. Today, we face similar battles with aging pipes and crumbling systems. It's like history's way of reminding us that water, while essential, can be a real prima donna. And let's not forget the politics of water. In ancient Rome, access to water was a power move, a way to keep the masses happy or not. Fast forward to now, and water management remains a hot-button issue, with debates over allocation, access, and sustainability. It's the soap opera that never ends, featuring a cast of bureaucrats, engineers, and the occasional environmentalist. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Roman aqueducts is their testament to human ingenuity and ambition. These were structures built with a vision that spanned not just miles, but centuries. They remind us that great feats require great effort, and sometimes a few political favors. As we grapple with our own infrastructure challenges, from climate change to urban sprawl, the Roman aqueducts serve as both inspiration and cautionary tale. They whisper to us through the ages, urging us to balance ambition with practicality, and reminding us that while the past may be carved in stone, the future is ours to sculpt. So, As we wrap up our journey through the annals of Roman engineering, let's raise a metaphorical goblet to the aqueducts, the unsung heroes of history, the silent witnesses of an empire's rise and fall, and the enduring icons of human endeavor. Whether you're sipping from a modern tap or tossing a coin into the Trevi fountain, remember that you're part of a story that began over 2 millennia ago, a story written in stone, water, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. And on that note, if you ever find yourself in Rome, take a moment to appreciate these ancient marvels, because in the end, they're more than just conduits of water. They're conduits of history, bridging the past and the present with every drop. Your eyelids reluctantly part as the first slivers of dawn stretch across the sky, painting hues of gold over the sprawling fields of Mesopotamia. Welcome to the bustling world of ancient Sumer, around 3000 BCE, where you, yes, you, are a farmer in the heart of the Fertile Crescent. This isn't just any old patch of dirt. It's the cradle of civilization, where humanity first dipped its toes into the waters of agriculture. You haul yourself up from your mat in a mud brick home. Think eco-friendly, minimalist chic. Not much in the way of insulation, but hey, it's sustainable. These bricks, made from river clay and straw, are sun-dried, forming the backbone of Sumerian architecture. It's a cozy setup, despite the fact that the walls may occasionally dissolve in a heavy rain. But let's not get bogged down in mud brick maintenance. There's farming to do. The geography of Mesopotamia is your silent partner in this farming gig. Nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this land is a farmer's dream, or maybe nightmare, depending on the season. These rivers are the lifeblood of the region, flooding predictably enough to deposit rich silt across the plains, keeping your fields fertile. Forget about seasonal affective disorder. It's all about seasonal agricultural disorder here. Too much water, drowning crops. Too little, dust bowl. But with some serious irrigation know-how, you've turned this land into a veritable breadbasket. Early morning is prime time for agricultural work. The sun isn't yet a fiery tyrant, so it's the perfect opportunity to get a jump start on the day. You step outside and inhale deeply, the air tinged with the earthy scent of wet soil. The world is quiet, save for the distant sounds of the rivers. You're not just farming for yourself, part of the backbone of a society that's just starting to figure out what it means to settle down and build something permanent. As you survey your fields, you reach for your tools. Let's talk about these bad boys, the sickle and the plow. These aren't just relics hanging on a museum wall. They're the real deal, and their design hasn't changed much over the millennia. The sickle, with its crescent-shaped blade, is perfect for cutting through stalks of barley or wheat. Meanwhile, the plow, a simple yet ingenious contraption usually pulled by oxen, is your goader for turning the earth. It's a bit like trading in your hybrid car for a horse-drawn carriage, but it gets the job done. This morning, you're focused on the logistics of planting. Seeds don't plant themselves, after all. You walk the fields, scattering barley seeds by hand, a rhythmic motion that feels almost meditative. Barley is a staple here, not just for bread, but for brewing beer. Because even 5,000 years ago, people knew how to have a good time. Rumor has it the gods themselves enjoy a pint now and then. Now, let's not get too misty-eyed over this idyllic scene. Farming in ancient Sumer is no romantic picnic. It's more like a constant battle against the elements, and sometimes your neighbors. Land dispute, anyone. There's a reason the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest legal codes, dedicates a chunk to irrigation rights and crop damage. When water is life, you can bet it's worth fighting over. And so, as the sun begins its ascent, you're knee-deep in the daily grind, navigating the challenges of ancient agriculture with little more than basic tools and a whole lot of grit. But you're not just feeding your family. You're laying the groundwork for a civilization that will influence the world for millennia to come. Not bad for a day's work, huh? As you plant the seeds of tomorrow, the promise of a new day, and perhaps a bountiful harvest, unfolds before you. As the seeds of tomorrow sink into the soil, let's pivot to what makes those seeds sprout into the lifeblood of Sumerian society, the marvel of ancient irrigation. Now, before you roll your eyes at the term marvel, let's put this into perspective. We're talking about a civilization that engineered canals and ditches in a way that even some modern cities would envy. It's like the ancient equivalent of turning a desert into a Las Vegas resort, minus the neon lights and slot machines. The Sumerians weren't just tossing water around like it was a weekend hobby. Nope, they were methodical, almost fanatical about it. With a system that looks a bit like early Sim City, they dug extensive networks of canals that diverted water from the Tigris and Euphrates. These weren't just shallow ditches either. We're talking big enough to float a small boat. I mean, who needs a gym membership when you're digging one of these bad boys with nothing but muscle and determination? Now, let's dispel a myth right here. This wasn't a job done by a couple of overachieving farmers in their spare time. This was a community effort, often mandated by the powers that be. By powers that be, I mean the temple priests and city officials. Because let's face it, in Sumer, the line between divine favor and municipal governance was blurrier than your vision after too much barley beer. Speaking of barley, let's dive into the economics of this grainy wonder. In Sumer, barley was more than just a cereal crop. It was currency. Picture it as the Bitcoin of the Bronze Age, only less volatile and far more edible. It wasn't just used to make bread and beer. It was a measure of wealth and a medium of exchange. Ever heard the term barley wages? That's right, workers were often paid in barley. Imagine getting your paycheck in sacks of grain. Not exactly pocket-friendly, but hey, at least you could literally eat your savings if times got tough. This brings us to the social structure of ancient Sumer, where farmers like you are at the bottom of the ladder. It's ironic, really. Here you are, breaking your back to feed the city, while the upper crust enjoys the fruits of your labor, literally and figuratively. In the grand hierarchy, you're a couple of rungs below the priests, scribes, and merchants. These folks are living the good life, sipping barley beer in shaded courtyards while you're out here wrestling with the elements. It's the original tale of the 1% versus the 99%. But let's not kid ourselves with the romance of the noble farmer narrative. The reality is a grind. The work is relentless, the pay is grain, and the societal recognition is practically non-existent. You're essential, sure, but also expendable. If that sounds like a harsh pill to swallow, it's because it is. But hey, someone's gotta do it right. And that someone, my friend, is you. As you toil away, there's always that looming threat of a neighbor deciding they want a piece of your carefully irrigated pie. Land disputes were as common as mud brick houses, and with water being the golden ticket, tensions ran high. These disputes sometimes escalated into full-blown feuds. Imagine the Hatfields and McCoys, but with more mud and less moonshine. Yet despite the back-breaking labor and social injustices, there's a strange allure to this life. Maybe it's the simplicity of it all. Waking up with the sun, working with the earth, providing for your family and community. Or maybe it's the sense of continuity, knowing that what you're doing is part of a tradition that stretches back generations. Sure, you might be at the bottom of the ladder, but you're also part of something bigger, an intricate system that, for all its flaws, is laying the groundwork for civilization as we know it. And so, as the sun climbs higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the fertile fields, you press on. The promise of a bountiful harvest is as much a product of your labor as it is a gift from the gods. It's a dance of human ingenuity and nature's caprice, where every drop of water and every grain of barley plays its part in the grand tapestry of Sumerian life. As the sun reaches its mid-morning zenith, setting the fields aglow with a golden hue, the day's rhythm nudges you towards the bustling marketplace of Uruk. This isn't just a swap meet. It's the social hub where farmers, merchants, and the occasional priest converge. Picture it as the ancient version of both Wall Street and Facebook combined, minus the skyscrapers and cat memes. Here, the air is thick with the scent of trade, and the soundtrack is a lively mix of haggling voices and bleeding livestock. Now, let's set the scene. In this dusty agora, you're not alone. You're joined by fellow farmers, each lugging carts filled with the fruits of their labor, crops, livestock, and perhaps a few handcrafted goods. The market is a kaleidoscope of activity. Picture stalls lined with baskets brimming with barley, dates, and legumes. It's enough to make you reconsider your diet of mud-brick chic. Trade here isn't just a friendly neighborhood barter system. It's the engine driving Sumerian society. And it's not just about swapping goods. There's a currency of sorts involved. Enter the shekel, an early form of currency that started its life as a weight measurement for barley. Talk about a multitasker. In Sumer, a shekel wasn't just a coin. It was an idea, a representation of value that could be carried in your head rather than your pocket. This brings us to the concept of credit, a groundbreaking Sumerian innovation. Think of it as the original buy now, pay later scheme. Farmers could borrow seeds, tools, or even livestock, promising to repay after the harvest. But let's be clear, defaulting wasn't just a ding on your credit score. It could mean losing your land or worse, your freedom. Debt slavery was a very real consequence, so think twice before you skip that payment. In the heart of this market scene, you'll find the scribes, ancient record keepers who were the human equivalent of Excel spreadsheets. They're perched on stools, their fingers stained with clay rather than ink. These scribes are the unsung heroes of the market, documenting every transaction on cuneiform tablets. Picture a slab of wet clay and a reed stylus, and you've got the world's first ledger. Forget about autocorrect or cloud storage. These bad boys were hard copy in the most literal sense. Now, let's debunk a myth, the romantic notion of the scribe as a solitary monk-like figure diligently etching history into clay. In reality, these guys were hustlers of a different breed, swamped with the demands of commerce, taxation, and legal disputes. And the tablets they produced, not exactly portable. Imagine lugging around a stack of clay tablets. It's a wonder they didn't all end up with chronic back pain. Despite their cumbersome nature, these tablets were revolutionary. They laid the groundwork for bureaucracy, enabling everything from tax collection to complex trade agreements. In a way, they were the ancestors of the modern contract, ensuring that promises made in the market didn't evaporate like the morning mist. In this vibrant marketplace, every transaction, every shouted bargain, is a thread in the tapestry of Sumerian life. It's a dynamic scene where the past and future collide, where the simple exchange of goods fuels the growth of a civilization. And while it might lack the glamour of later empires, it's here, in these bustling stalls, that the seeds of economic principles were sown. So next time you're grumbling about your credit card interest rates or the complexity of your tax return, tip your hat to the Sumerians. They gave us the building blocks of modern economics, albeit in a form that was heavier and less user-friendly. As you navigate the chaos of the market, keep in mind that every shekel you haggle for, every deal you strike, is part of a legacy that stretches back thousands of years. As the sun creeps past its zenith, casting longer shadows over the bustling market square, you ponder the absurdity and brilliance of it all. World of trade in ancient Sumer wasn't just about economics. It was a social theater, a place where fortunes were made and lost, reputations built and shattered. It was a realm where the abstract concepts of trust and credit began to take form, paving the way for the economic systems we often take for granted today. But let's not get too starry-eyed here. The reality of market life in Sumer was as gritty as the clay tablets that recorded it. You had to be savvy, sharp, and maybe a bit ruthless. After all, the market wasn't just a place for camaraderie. It was a competitive arena where the stakes were high and the margins slim. And while the scribes might have had the final say in the records, it was the farmers, the traders, and the merchants who played the real game, navigating a world where every transaction was a small gamble on the future. As the market begins to wind down, and the day's heat gives way to the cooler embrace of evening, you head back to your fields, perhaps a little lighter on barley and a little heavier on shekels. The market has been a whirlwind of sights, sounds, and deals, a place where the Sumerian way of life comes vividly to life in all its complexity. And while it might not have the glitzy allure of later civilizations, it's here, in the dust and clamor of the marketplace, that the foundations of a new world were laid, grain by grain, shekel by shekel. And so, as you trudge back towards the fields, the echoes of the market still ringing in your ears, you carry with you not just the tangible fruits of trade, but the intangible legacy of a society that dared to dream beyond the horizon. It's a legacy that would resonate through the ages, shaping the very fabric of civilization. Not bad for a day's work, wouldn't you say? As you trudge back towards the fields, the echoes of the market still ringing in your ears, you're reminded that it's not just trade, but the simple pleasures of life that make the grind worthwhile. Speaking of simple pleasures, let's talk about lunch, or in Sumerian terms, the break where you stop pretending to be a cog in the economic machine and start being a human with actual needs. Ah, the Sumerian diet, a testament to the land's generosity and its inhabitants' creativity. At the heart of this culinary repertoire is bread. But not just any bread. This is the original gluten party, a staple that came in as many varieties as there were grains to grind. Forget about your artisanal sourdough or gluten-free fantasies. We're talking about loaves dense enough to double as a weapon, made from barley or emmer wheat, because why settle for one grain when you can have both? And then there's beer, the ancient Sumerian way of making even the harshest day feel a little softer around the edges. Beer wasn't just a beverage. It was a cultural institution, probably invented by someone who realized that soggy bread wasn't just a culinary failure, but a gateway to a good time. Brewed from barley, this concoction was less of a crisp lager and more of a gritty porridge. But hey, it got the job done, and let's face it, the guards themselves were rumored to have a taste for the stuff. Now, let's set the scene for that midday meal. You're not eating solo, scrolling through a clay tablet version of social media. Nope, meals in Sumer are a communal affair, an exercise in hospitality that makes today's dinner parties look like amateur hour. The concept of hospitality was practically a religion in itself. Invite your neighbor, your cousin, even the guy who just haggled you down to half a shekel at the market. Eating together was more than just sustenance. It was a social glue, binding the community tighter than the mortar in those mud brick walls. And speaking of religion, here's where it all ties together. Meals weren't just about filling bellies. They were offerings to the gods, a divine insurance policy for a bountiful harvest. Picture this. Before you take a bite of that barley loaf, you break off a piece and set it aside for the gods. It's a bit like sharing your winnings with the house, just to keep the odds in your favor for next time. Religion in Sumer permeated every aspect of life, and the temple was the beating heart of the community. Sure, it was a place of worship, but it was also a hub of social and economic activity. Picture it as the original multi-purpose venue, part church, part bank, part community center. People gathered here not just to pray, but to conduct business, settle disputes, and even distribute surplus food. It's like the ancient precursor to your local Starbucks, minus the overpriced lattes and Wi-Fi. Now, let's debunk a bit of mythology around these temples. The romantic notion of serene priests piously tending to the divine couldn't be further from reality. In truth, temple life was a bustling hive of activity, and the priests were more like ancient project managers, orchestrating everything from religious ceremonies to agricultural planning. They were the middlemen between you and the gods, ensuring that your offerings, whether barley or beer, were duly noted in the divine ledger. And what about these offerings? Was it all just a divine protection racket? Perhaps. But it also created a sense of stability, a social contract between the people and their deities. In a world where the next flood or drought could spell disaster, having the gods on your side was the ultimate insurance policy. It's a strategy as old as time. Hedge your bets, keep the cosmic scales balanced, and hope that the sun shines just enough without boiling your barley in the field. As the afternoon sun begins to dip, casting long shadows over the temple's ziggurat, you're reminded that the rhythm of Sumerian life is a delicate dance between human effort and divine will. It's a world where every loaf of bread, every sip of beer, and every whispered prayer threads together the tapestry of existence. And so, as you finish your meal, you can't help but marvel at the absurdity and brilliance of it all. Here, at the crossroads of agriculture, commerce, and spirituality, the Sumerians laid the foundations for a civilization that would echo through the ages. It's a legacy as intoxicating as a well-brewed beer, leaving you both satiated and thirsty for more. With the afternoon stretching lazily before you, the prospect of returning to the fields seems less daunting. The break has fortified you not just physically, but mentally. You're ready to tackle whatever the guards, or your neighbor's unruly goats, might throw your way next. And while the sun may still be a fiery tyrant, casting its relentless gaze over the land, the knowledge that you're part of something far greater than yourself is a comfort as enduring as the mud brick walls that shelter you. And so you rise, leaving behind the remnants of your midday feast and the camaraderie that makes it all worthwhile. You're ready to face the afternoon with a renewed sense of purpose and perhaps a little more barley beer than is strictly advisable. The ancient Sumerians knew something we often forget, that life, like a good meal, is best shared. And with that thought, you head back into the fields, ready to continue the dance of survival and celebration that is the heart of Sumerian life. As you step back into the fields, the sun begins its slow descent, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. It's a reminder that time in Sumer is measured not by clocks, but by the sun's arc across the sky and the rhythm of the seasons. Farming here is a cyclical dance with nature, a perpetual loop that dictates every aspect of your life. from the first light of dawn to the last glow of twilight. Let's dive into this dance, shall we? The Sumerian year is divided into two main seasons, the rainy season and the dry season, each bringing its own set of challenges and opportunities. During the rainy season, the rivers swell, flooding the fields and depositing a fresh layer of fertile silt, a natural fertilizer that's as reliable as it is messy. This is the time for planting, when the earth is soft and yielding, ready to embrace the seeds of a new harvest. The dry season, on the other hand, is a race against time, where irrigation becomes your lifeline and every drop of water is as precious as gold. This seamless transition between seasons is the heartbeat of Sumerian agriculture. It's a delicate balance, a high-stakes game where one misstep could spell disaster. Too much rain, and you're looking at a swamp. Too little, and it's a dust bowl. It's like Goldilocks porridge, but with higher stakes and fewer bears. The cyclical nature of farming in Sumer isn't just about survival. It's about continuity, about being part of a tradition that stretches back centuries. The tools you use, the techniques you employ, even the seeds you plant, they're all part of a legacy handed down through generations. It's a reminder that while the world around you may change, the fundamental cycles of life remain constant. And speaking of legacy, let's talk about the impact of Sumerian agriculture on future civilizations. The innovations developed here, irrigation systems, crop rotation, and even the humble plow, laid the groundwork for agricultural practices that would spread far beyond the borders of Mesopotamia. These techniques would be adopted and adapted by civilizations across the world, from the Nile Valley to the Indus River Basin, shaping the agricultural landscapes of the ancient world. Take irrigation, for example. The canals and ditches of Sumer were a marvel of engineering, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of nature's caprice. These early irrigation systems would inspire future innovations, from the aqueducts of Rome to the qanats of Persia. They were the blueprint for harnessing water, turning barren landscapes into fertile fields, and supporting the growth of cities and civilizations. And let's not forget about the plow. This simple tool, so ubiquitous in ancient Sumer, would become a symbol of agriculture itself, a representation of humanity's ability to shape the land to its will. The design of the plow would evolve over millennia, from wooden frames to iron blades, but its essence would remain the same, a testament to the enduring legacy of Sumerian innovation. But as we marvel at these achievements, let's not overlook the harsh realities faced by Sumerian farmers. For all their ingenuity, life here was a constant struggle against the elements and the whims of fate. The romantic notion of the noble farmer, toiling in harmony with nature, belies the harsh truth that survival was a daily battle, fought with sweat and grit and sheer determination. Yet despite these challenges, there's a certain romance to the life of a Sumerian farmer. It's a life of simplicity and purpose, where the cycles of nature dictate the rhythm of your days, and where the fruits of your labor feed not just your family, but an entire civilization. It's a life that, for all its hardships, offers a sense of connection to the land, to the past, and to the future. And now, as we draw the curtain on this day in ancient Sumer, it's worth pondering how much has really changed in the life of a farmer over the millennia. Sure, we've traded oxen for tractors, mud brick homes for steel and glass skyscrapers, but the essence remains the same. Farming is still a dance with nature, a balancing act between human ambition and the forces of the natural world. In today's world, the challenges are different but no less daunting. Climate change, resource scarcity, and global markets have added new layers of complexity to the age-old task of growing food. But the core principles remain unchanged. The cyclical nature of the seasons, the reliance on the earth's bounty, and the ever-present need to innovate and adapt. So, as you sit back and reflect on this journey through time, remember that the story of Sumerian agriculture is not just a tale of the past, but a living legacy that continues to shape our world today. It's a reminder that while the tools and technologies may change, the fundamental challenges and triumphs of farming remain timeless. And with that thought, you can rest easy, knowing that you're part of a story that stretches back to the dawn of civilization, a story of resilience, ingenuity, and the enduring human spirit. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, casting a serene glow over the fields, you take a moment to appreciate the beauty of this ancient land, the cradle of civilization, and the birthplace of a legacy that continues to resonate through the ages.